everyone. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the July 12th edition of the Town of Basalt Town Council meeting. And we've got some excellent work ahead of us this evening. And with that, I would like to call our meeting to order and ask our town clerk to call the roll.
Happily. All right, let's begin with Elise Huddle.
Present.
Thank you. Ryan Slack.
Here.
Bill Kane.
Here.
Peter Schindler.
Present.
Angela Anderson.
Here.
Glenn Drummond.
Here.
And David Knight.
Here.
The A-team is present. Thank you.
Just a technological check-in. Jeff and Ryan, are you all good? Can you hear us okay and see us? And
I can hear you just fine, Mayor.
a good deal. Jeff, you on?
I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Okay, you're not like rowing on the river right now, are you? Great, well, so I'll keep an eye on you guys, but if we are plowing ahead, then you've got to say something. Don't be bashful about weighing in. I'll keep an eye out for hands up and all that sort of thing, but we'll do what we can.
Thanks.
So, alrighty, our first order of business is the consent agenda, which consists of the minutes from the June 28th, 2022 meeting. So I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mayor, I move that the town council approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded, voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So at this point in our meeting, this is our call to the public. This is an opportunity for anybody in the public that is physically present or has called in to address council on an item which is not scheduled on our agenda. This is not an opportunity to talk about something that's coming up later on the agenda. This is general commentary on other matters not scheduled on tonight's meeting. So please keep your comments brief. We'd like them to be about 3 minutes, not exceed 3 minutes. And with that, I will ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to address the town council item not on the agenda. Do we have any hands raised for people, for callers in? Pam?
I cannot see that, James. Can you?
There are 3 people in the attendees section. Do any of you that are in the attendees section, would you like to speak to the council during public comments? If so, please raise your hand.
Okay.
We have no hands up.
Alrighty, hearing none, and I think given the nature of telephonic communications, we stay open. If somebody calls in and just missed us, you know, we'll kind of come back. So that's it for call to the public. So mayor and council reports and comments. Anyone? Okay, well, I just think maybe we ought to inform the public that our town council had a retreat last Friday. Took the better part of a day, and we had an opportunity to review existing projects, and we did some brainstorming and visioning, and really an excellent day. I think we had John Stabney from Northwest COG that helped facilitate the meeting, and I'm very grateful to all my fellow councilors for the time and energy that everybody put in, and I think we felt pretty energized by the outcome of that meeting, so that was a very good one. So next order of business, if there are no comments from council, there must be something.
Well, I was trying to remember like the timing of when I last reported out. I think actually the Housing Coalition, we have received a small grant that will go towards the scope of work to hire a consultant to put together a 3 to 5 year work plan for the coalition. So we're pretty excited about that.
Oh, that's great.
And then once that gets established, we'll be looking at expanding out our committees if folks are interested.
Nice. Okay, keep trying to fill Route I. I see it coming up, creeping up.
Yeah.
Not gonna.
Oh, no, definitely
No,
not.
definitely not. We don't have to worry about the spillway this
No.
year.
0 chance.
Okay.
How many boats have they checked?
Ooh, I think they've caught, as of last count, they've checked, they've deconned 9. but only 3 had mussels. We're actually kind of behind this year, which is good. I mean, it's a good sign. So, but I'll make sure to get the proper update for the next one.
Okay, Ryan, did you want to do a manager's report, or is that too awkward given your remote situation tonight?
I don't have a report for you all.
Okay, Ryan's in the great state of Maine, so not close by. So we'll then turn to this evening's council actions, and the first item is item 6A, resolution number 42, series of 2022, resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, authorizing engagement of owners' representative services with Wember, Inc. for the Midland Avenue Streetscape project. So Catherine and Mr. Wember's on our virtual attendance here. Paul, we got you. You might want to turn your camera on, but
I think he may be driving.
oh, okay. Got it.
Just
In that case,
about
don't
back.
don't
I will
your
turn it on in a
camera
moment.
Great, well, thanks, thanks Mayor and thanks council members. Tonight I'm bringing to you a contract for owner's representative services for the Midland Avenue Streetscape project. As you know, on November 21st, the Basalt citizens passed a bond initiative that in part intended to fund the Midland project. The project seeks to maximize pedestrian space, improve public spaces, and provide vibrancy to our downtown Basalt. The town and staff are dedicated to good stewardship of public funds, and therefore the primary function of this owner's representation will be to assist the design team, our CMGC, who, as you know, are the Connect One team, and Stutzman Gerbaz, in the monitoring of our project goals, schedule, and budget. So in May, we put out an RFP for these services, and we received 3 great, well-qualified proposals from qualified teams. We interviewed all 3 proposals, reviewed their proposals, and called all references. We determined that the team of Wember, Inc. would be the best suited for the position. This group that includes Dave Detweiler to my side here, and Paul Wember has extensive experience in the Valley. They worked on the Basalt Library, they did the Basalt Firehouse. They've also worked up Valley with Picken County on their recently constructed new building. So they're familiar with construction challenges and opportunities in the Valley. So tonight I'm just going to introduce these 2 to you. They'll say hello, and then we're open for any questions you have around their role with that project.
Great.
Well, thank you. I'm Dave Detweiler from Wember. Paul Wember, our founder and president, is on the line here. Apologies he couldn't be here. But I've been working in the Valley since 1996. My first project up here was at the Maroon Creek Club, doing some of the affordable housing up there. So I've been up here for a long, long time and really excited. This project, the more time Paul and I spent working on the proposal, the more ideas we just kept cranking. And actually at our interview, it almost turned into a brainstorming session of ideas. So we're really thrilled to be here. Thank you for the opportunity, and open to answer any questions you have.
Great. Counselors? I've got one for you.
Sure.
So have you had a chance to look under the hood of this project a little bit?
A little bit,
Yeah.
Little bit. I can't say we've lived through the day-to-day grind of being on Midland and the issues that you have. You certainly have some visual things that you see as designers and people that do this a lot. But I think that's part of the key, is how do you really, you don't lose the history of the town, but still have that upgrade that people are looking for. That's really, really critical, because you don't want downtown Grand Junction, Main Street, as much as that's an okay place. That's not this place, right?
What's our biggest challenge?
Weather is always a challenge. Right now and you have the summer season and the winter season. And construction inflation is nuts right now. It's still cranking about 1% a month, but if managed well, you can control it. We just took our final prices on a new library in Clifton. over the weekend, well, Friday, and they came in right on budget because we managed the process of getting there really tight. You have to just be uber attention to detail on budgets right now.
Yeah. Great. David?
Appreciated the proposal. It was nice. It was well organized. And as a project manager, I was like, this is good. Only question I have, or I guess just a comment, if somebody on staff could kind of double click on kind of how the scope works between Wember and planning and engineering and how that all works together just for the benefit of everybody here.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to-
Sure. So the owner's representative will oversee the process that we're going through. Planning will assist with driving us through any entitlements or any building permits, and of course the design work. The owner's rep will help us clarify and confirm that we're at the level of construction that the draws are being requested for. So it's a double check on all of the work. And they're also there to drive forward any consultants that get behind on schedule, or anything that's kind of falling off to the side, or maybe that just needs to be tightened up and maybe some of the screws screwed in a little bit tighter. So it's really an oversight, and it helps reduce the risk for the town financially.
Thanks.
Anyone else? When do you think we might be doing deep utility? When's that construction? That's probably going to be the most disruptive phase. Is that spring '23, or what are we thinking?
Yeah, I think there's some balancing act that needs to occur around dewatering and the seasonality of the site. But yes, generally speaking, spring 2023. But we'll be back in front of you guys shortly, within a month, to talk further on that. And I'm sure Dave will be with us, and you'll be seeing more of him. But we'll be getting into, or start to get into some of those details next time we'll see you.
All right. Very good.
In the past, when you've had projects like this that have affected a downtown and the business areas, how have you, in your proposal it notes that you keep the community informed and engaged. What is that going to look like?
Well, on the information side, there's the kind of two concepts. One is just informing people of things that you've already decided. And if you probably have read lately, City of Aspen has experienced some with the parking, the downtown parking and the bike lane, that even though you think you have communicated, have people heard. And so I think one of the big things that we're going to have to do is communicate and actively seek, have you heard us? Do you understand what we've said, that this area is going to be impacted? Because as people don't read their emails, they don't read what they get in the mail. So we're really going to have to focus hard on that. But in terms of the input, I think philosophically we all need to decide really how much input, because you're never going to please everybody, I guess is where I'm headed. And so at some point we need to gather all that input from the public and really have a way to divide it up and really just have this group establish out of that, all that input, here's the 10 big ones. Here's the things that are really going to make this project a success. And 50 years down the road, everybody's going to go, wow, those folks were so smart that they did this. And I used Grand Junction Main Street as an example of what we wouldn't want to do. But in history, when you go back to the 60s and the folks that made those decisions to revamp Main Street from the ugly 4-lane deal that it was to what it is now, those folks are very well thought of in that community about the bold leap that they did.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to come back to this group as we sort through all that input.
Great. Okay. Any others? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the retention of Lambert as owner's representative for our streetscape, Midland Streetscape project.
Mayor, I move that town council adopt resolution number 42 of series of 2022.
Second.
Okay, been moved and seconded. this, but I think we could do this with voice vote. It's a resolution. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that completes resolution number 42. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
We're
We
excited
look
to
forward
be
to
part
seeing,
of the team.
look forward to seeing more of you.
Yes.
And hope we all do well.
Thank you.
So the next order of business is a public hearing and joint discussion with Bach. So I don't know what Bach members we have on.
We're a little bit early. It looks like we have Mike Kozdraski on there. That appears to be the only Bach member that. Oh, and sitting over there. That's great. And I think Kathy is going to join us here shortly, so.
Is there something else we can take? We can't move up the
I don't think there's anything to
Salt
move.
Circle.
Let me just see if the applicant is outside.
Okay,
So
great. Stall for time. Must be a baseball game we could get on.
Could we do 62?
We can
The
have
last one?
Ryan and Jeff regale us with stories about their vacations so we can all live
That's right.
vicariously.
Vicarious. Well, evening, Michael.
Good to be back.
Very soon. We thought we'd see you in about a year or so, but here we are.
And, well, I hope we can drag this out through the next recession, and then we can get back to work.
Well, we appreciate your enthusiasm. Great.
So
Jeff,
staff is going to share our
Jody.
screen here for a quick background presentation. And hopefully by the time we're through that, we'll have more Bach members since we're ahead of schedule here. All right. So to begin with, this is a public hearing on the Parcel 5 Cypress Meadows final PUD and subdivision application to construct 155 dwelling units on Parcel 5 of the Cypress Meadows PUD. The subject property, as has been discussed at prior meetings, is a 12-acre property. It's between the Park Modern development, which is located right here, and the Basalt Industrial Park, which is located to the south. And it's also located between the Willets Lake, which is located right here, and Willets Lane to the west. The proposal is for the construction of 155 dwelling units in 9 buildings, 7 of which are proposed to be free market buildings, and 2 of which are proposed to be deed-restricted units, and they're on the southern extent of the property. This evening, after staff's introduction, staff would suggest hearing comments from the applicants on the affordable housing proposal and component of the development. And then staff would suggest hearing comments from the Basalt Affordable Community Housing Commission, BAC, and having a joint discussion between BAC and the town council regarding the affordable housing component of the project. And then taking public comments because it is a notice public hearing. And then suggest council discussing and providing direction to staff on the affordable housing component of the project. As some background on the affordable housing component of the project, the applicants originally proposed to have 2 buildings that would consist of 44 rental affordable housing units. And they were proposed to meet the Category 2 level for mitigation, which is 100% of area median income. And that was at the sketch plan level. At the preliminary plan application, the applicants changed their proposal to add dwelling units to the deed restricted total. So they proposed to bump it up to 46 deed restricted units. And they also revised their application to propose providing 2 buildings of rental housing for the missing middle class, as it's been termed, that would serve between the town's Category 3 deed restricted category and 350% of the area median income. The Basalt Affordable Housing Community Housing Committee, BAC, struggled with the missing middle concept to begin with, And while Bach was working on their review of the rental housing proposal, the applicant's review moved on to the council at the preliminary plan stage. And the council expressed interest in the missing middle concept, but asked the applicant to consider changing their proposal to incorporate some for sale product from the rental product that was proposed. And in response, the applicants revised their proposal to provide 2 affordable housing buildings of for sale product that would be for individuals making up to 250% of the area median income. And so Bach subsequently reviewed this updated proposal and didn't support it, but directed staff to try to set up a joint meeting between Bach and the council. As such, during the council's following meeting, staff informed council that Bach was not supportive of the revised proposal, and that Bach wanted to do a joint meeting to discuss the town's affordable housing goals for the project. And staff recommended at that meeting of the council that council approve the preliminary plan, but hold a joint meeting with Bach in conjunction with the final plan application, and establish an acceptable affordable housing program as part of that final plan review. The council at that meeting chose to approve the preliminary plan review and identify that one of the buildings of 23 units could follow the missing middle proposal as a for sale product, but directed staff to schedule this joint meeting with the Bach Commission as part of the final plan review to discuss the programming for the other 23 units that are part of the proposal. So staff has scheduled this joint meeting this evening with the Bach Commission. It was also identified at the last council review that the code amendment would be needed to provide council flexibility to accept units above the Category 2 level as mitigation. And so the applicants have provided proposed code language that's in your packet. Bach has provided bullet points on their thoughts that are included in your packet materials and that are shown here on the screen. Down to those. Staff believes that there are basically a couple direction options that could be provided at the end of the conversation. One, there could be direction provided to staff to process the code amendments and the community housing guideline amendments to approve the applicant's proposal for both the affordable housing buildings to contain deed-restricted for sale housing for individuals and families making up to 250% of the area median income. Or a second option could be to provide direction that one of the deed-restricted buildings be required to contain Category 2 rental units to satisfy the mitigation requirements and allow the other deed-restricted building to contain deed-restricted for sale housing for individuals and families making up to 250% of the AMI. There could be other variations on these options as well, but those are the two that kind of stuck out to staff. And as noted this evening, staff thinks it would be most productive to hear comments from the applicants on their affordable housing proposal, and then hear comments from Bach members that are in attendance, and then have council discussion with Bach on the goals for the project and the programming for the second building. Staff would also suggest taking public comments as it's part of the noticed public hearing on the Parcel 5 final plan application, and then ultimately continuing the public hearing to July 26th. So with that, staff would suggest hearing comments from the applicants on their affordable housing.
Yeah, before we do that, let me just try to clarify for people that may be here. Can you just, with a show of hands, indicate people that are here would like to make comments on this Phase 5 Cypress Meadows application? None, okay. So with that, then, I was about to go on at great lengths to explain the process we're going to go through tonight, but if there's no one here to comment, I think we can go directly to your presentation, Michael. Then we're going to engage with Bach, and then we're going to talk about the options that were just outlined for how to address the affordable housing requirements for the project. It's going to go back to Planning Commission and then come back, so.
I think James did a pretty good job of summing things up. Just so you'll understand this, we came in with an obligation for 21 units. We did 44, moved it to 46. The other thing we did that was pretty significant, once we started looking at the units as we moved towards preliminary plan, we just found that with the square footage that is the minimum required, which is what one's inclined to do with this obligation, we were not comfortable or proud of asking people to live in something quite that limited. So we increased the average size by about 25%. But we did start out with a rental proposal. And we also started learning a little more about the affordable housing here. What we learned is a majority of the Category 2 affordable housing is occupied by Aspen businesses. And we questioned then, is there really that great a need for Category 2 when you can simply ask those people to kind of move on when their lease comes up and let Aspen do what they do to us, and that's that we should allow, well, I'm trying to say Aspen doesn't allow Basalt workers in their affordable housing. I'm not sure that we have to be the Basalt taxpayers, supporting Aspen businesses, which are largely no longer local anyhow. It's just money going out the door. But I guess I wanted to say we came in with a proposal to do rental housing. What we heard, especially from you guys a few weeks back, month back, 6 weeks back, is that there's an awful lot of rental housing and there isn't much sale and there's not much sale in the pipeline. Could we consider that? And that's exactly what we did. And while I might have had a prior preference for thinking that rental was better for the community, I was certainly listening to you guys, and also that variety is probably better than a single kind of solution. As we thought about it a little bit, a few things occurred to us that are, I think, quite positive to consider doing a little more of the for sale, and that is, so we're involved in Park Modern. It's 75 units. Finding qualified board members to sit on an HOA board isn't the easiest thing in the world. And at Park Modern, we've been lucky to have two very capable attorneys, both of whom have had experience with HOAs on our board. But a 23-unit HOA, which is what we're looking at in the first building now, and that's where the commitment is a pretty small HOA. And it'd be a lot better to have an HOA with twice as many people. It would be more efficient, and you're probably capable of finding the people that both want to do it and are qualified. The other thing that's come up for us in our trying to compare these two things is I think a for sale product attracts people that are more committed to the community and are likely to stay there longer. So that was a second reason we thought it was pretty appealing. I guess, anything else you want to say about that, Jeff? I guess I wanted to say one more thing. We've been very caught up in our concern about the increasingly disappearing middle income opportunity. And I realize there's a lot we all don't know, but the town would always have the right in the future, not for us, but in future sales, to be raising those caps to better address the economics of the community in the future. And I thought that was a pretty interesting opportunity that certainly I don't think you'd want to give a landlord the right to raise rents without quite a process, but I think you could do it for that community if you felt that community of people should, be in a financially stronger position, or that the asset was worth more to the community. I don't know, but I think it'd build in some flexibility for you guys going forward. And we're here to do what is your pleasure at the end of the day.
Okay. Questions? Let's go to, I would like to welcome our BOC members. We have, how many BOCers do we have in the audience? And there we go, one. And Doug is on, and Kathy is on, and David's with Michael. David, would you like to join BOC tonight?
Mike
Kostrowski's there. So, Kathy, are you chairing that? Would you like to take the lead and maybe provide comments and give us some thoughts about how to best address the code and the affordable housing requirements at
Yeah.
phase 5?
Should we just do the public hearing? I know.
Officially
Close
open
it.
it and close it.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's not a bad idea. Well, before we do that, let us take comment from the public. We already asked, there's no one in the audience that indicated an interest in commenting on this that's physically present. Is there anyone that has called in that's interested in addressing council on phase 5? Okay, hearing none, then we will move on to conversation with Bach and maybe get your thoughts and direction, guys. And I don't know if there's a rigorous structure to this, but maybe Kathy, you could lead off. And I think we're all ears here, so we'd really be happy to hear everyone's thoughts and comments and provide suggestions as to how do we best address affordable housing and address our code requirements as well. So,
Mayor, if I might, we did have one hand come up from the public just after you
Okay.
close the comment.
all right, let's address that then.
Yeah. Jess, would you like to speak to the council on parcel 5? I saw your hand go up. Jess, you might be muted still.
Yeah, just,
Can you unmute?
there it goes.
Jess, can you speak to the council, or would you like to speak to the council?
Want me to promote him?
Yeah, try to promote him. Jess, would you like to provide comments to the council?
It remuted her.
If you'd like to unmute, please unmute.
Don't forget the name and address.
Let's do this. Why don't he can weigh in and talk to us when he can get voice communication with us. But in the meantime, let's get started. So Kathy, why don't you take the lead for Bach and provide some thoughts, or maybe summarize the discussions you guys have had.
Sure, thank you. And thank you for agreeing to have this for inviting us to this continued public hearing. I think that the concern of Bach basically boils down to what the code requires and what the applicant is asking and what the town is willing to approve. And I think that for Bach, we operate under a set of guidelines that, as a citizen advisory committee, that we volunteer our time and we listen to applications, and based on code, we make recommendations. We are, our scope is limited. If a project meets code, then, there aren't a lot of opportunities for us to tweak the project. We have had success in looking at livability standards and have been able to encourage developers to use those and to make projects better, we think. I think that part of the issue with the current Lot 5 project is that the applicant we feel has circumvented the code in order to get vested approvals that are voluntary. And so the requirement, the 21 units of required category housing for rent, are off the table currently. And I believe that, if I speak for my fellow board members, that is the issue that we're struggling with. We have parameters that we need to review a project, and that's how we have been approaching the 3.5 months of hearings that we had with the applicant. And at the last town council meeting, the council said, well, we like this other idea better, so we're gonna just say, okay, do the for sale housing. And it was disrespectful to the amount of time that the Bach Commission has put into this application based on the parameters that the town set for us. And I would like to turn it over to my other Bach members. I don't want to speak for everyone, but I believe that that in a nutshell, is the issue.
Thank you. Anyone else want to provide some thoughts?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pipe in here. Thank you, Kathy. I thought that was a good encapsulation of the overarching issues. But, I've prepared some remarks here. And I have some real concerns here too, having served on Bach now for over a year and having, with my background in affordable and workforce housing, working across the country with a number of different clientele, private and public. I have some real issues with the proposal as presented and agreed to back in June. This preliminary agreement between council and the developer last month to provide missing middle, quote unquote, housing to the community, to me is flawed on multiple fronts and should be scrapped and reconsidered. I think it's fair, like Kathy said, Bach takes issue with what the developer calls missing middle. I tried to meet him halfway, and I had a motion that was voted down by my fellow members, which is fine because it's democratic process. And to try to meet him up to 200% of AMI, but that wasn't apparently good enough. But what his proposal really is about is serving upper middle income and high income households and doing it through mitigation. So this proposal ignores Basalt's inclusionary housing or zoning requirements and should default back to the current zoning code. This is not a missing middle proposal, but this is a missing the mark proposal. It entirely ignores and misses the mark of who the program is intended to serve. The preliminary agreement directly contradicts the town of Basalt's community housing program and its goals. And quite frankly, it cannot reasonably be construed as affordable housing in the Mid-Valley. Only 39% of the units fall under category 3 of the 46 that have been proposed. 61% of the units proposed are over and above 120%, all the way up to 250%, which, by the way, surpasses Aspen Pickens County Housing Authority, which is the highest in the country. So I'm not sure why Basalt has to now exceed Aspen and everybody else in the country on serving such high AMI levels. That's new to me. So that's one of the things is like, when I want to ask the applicant and the council, what evidence did the applicant present other than current home prices to make the case for serving such high AMIs? And I don't think he made that case to Bach. And also the council's ready to make a major policy change to the program without a public debate or process on this subject, all for satisfying one agreement with one developer during a land use process. And I don't think that's appropriate. This seems to be, to me, making a public policy on the fly and just to satisfy one project that hasn't been well thought out and where there is no consensus on the issue. We voted only days prior to this preliminary agreement in June, early June. Bach rejected the revised proposal at the request of council, in fairness to the applicant, for nothing against. We rejected the modified proposal from June 7th that was presented to us. And again, Bach, our role, we don't have any decision-making authority. We all know that. But we are responsible under the code and under the town's ordinance to provide a sounding board on significant housing policy issues. We also are responsible for acting as a referral agency to council on affordable housing projects or projects referred to Bach by the town planner that are required to provide affordable housing according to the then current code. That's verbatim from the code that enables Bach to exist. And of course, many of you know, or I hope you know, I wrote a letter to council on June 13th, the day before you reached a preliminary agreement with the applicant, sharing my thoughts and concerns on parcel 5 and on some broader housing, community housing policies. And some of the key points from my letter I'd like to bring up. And I do think this latest proposal, and I stated it in the Bach meeting, is a substantial departure from the original proposal and subsequent iterations. Again, Bach unanimously rejected the proposal only days prior in a regularly scheduled public meeting. It changed the project from a rental to an ownership without first asking Bach for its opinion on the matter. Under the current code and housing guidelines, RO units cannot satisfy the town's inclusionary housing requirements, so the proposal is non-conforming and is at variance with the town's own established policies. So what is missing the middle income housing in Basalt? I raised that in my letter to you on the 13th of June. The answer is quite simple. It was kind of meant to be intuitive. The answer basically is households with incomes at 100% AMI. This is the definition of the missing middle income household makeup in Basalt. So for a 4-person household in Basalt, it's $105,000+, and then you modify that based on the number of persons per household, either downward or upward, as we all know. But there's even a larger issue looming over the Basalt Community Housing Program, and that's the fact that and this is an issue that Michael rightfully, in my opinion, raises this issue, and we've agreed on in many of the BAC meetings. More than about half, if not more than half, of the current occupants work elsewhere in the valley. I'm not sure they all, as Michael had stated, they all work up in Aspen. I'm not sure the data bears that out. We'd have to dig deeper and really determine that. But the housing program should, in my opinion, be primarily for Basalt employers and employees, and without clear agreement and reciprocity from other communities in the Roaring Fork Valley to house Basalt workers, I don't think we should be allowing a third or fourth priority necessarily for if we can't fill those units.
Mike, can I ask you to wrap this up? I mean, we want to hear from everybody on BAC, so.
Sure, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, this is, but I think it's a real important, I appreciate that. And I mean, essentially this, and I know you want to get onto the discussion, but this, as you saw from my chart that James had included in the pack, and it was based on what we received on June 7th. But when you compare the RO sales prices that were proposed, not the same ones that you agreed to, but they're not that far off, to the median market rate sales prices for townhomes and condos in Basalt, you can see that the proposed 2-bedroom RO unit prices, if you pull up that chart, James, if you could possibly do that from the packet, it shows that, in 2021, the median sale price of a townhome condo was $714,000, and the median price for a townhome condo fairly through year to date is $920,000. But again, this is a bit of a blip. Will this be the new normal? We don't know. However, when you look at the proposed sale prices for these RO units relative to the median market rate housing, we effectively obliterate, or we certainly blur, if not erase, the line between affordable housing or community housing and market rate housing. And that's a real concern. And if that's what we're going to do to the program, I have real policy concerns with that, and would question what role not just BAC plays, but what role the community housing program plays in the community. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Doug, did you want to offer some thoughts?
You're on mute.
You're muted, Doug.
There we are. There we are. I'll try to be quick. Clearly, Mike is the numbers man in the BAC committee. But I agree with a lot that's been said, especially Kathy's summary. This development was looking pretty good at the get-go, but the second revision threw us a curveball because, as Kathy said, it really takes us outside of our purview. It's the issue of the missing middle may be an interesting thing to pursue in future so that we get a better understanding of our community, but it is not an issue that is within the purview of the BAC committee. Simple as that. And so that's what resulted in this confusion and our reluctance to go forward without clarifying the policy issues.
Well, thank you.
That's it.
Yeah, well said. Anyone else from BAC? Yeah.
Just Craig's hand went up again too, just so you know.
Ann Baker. I agree with Mike. what he talks about, with the 250% being too high, of looking at it as the missing middle. It's really the missing high part. Something else that we had looked at was the time frame. I believe the time frame now is 10 years, and that seemed like a very long time to get affordable housing going. As far as changing it from rental to home ownership, I'm a proponent of home ownership. I think it creates a cohesive and a long-lasting community. However, this was thrown in at the last moment, and the rentals simply disappeared, as Kathy said. So that's what we have been talking about at Bach. That's it.
Great, thanks, Ann. Appreciate that. Let me, Jody, we're gonna let us get through a little bit of this discussion.
I just wanted to respond to one comment.
Okay.
The comment that this is public policy on the fly, I think, is a little misleading. There is a proposed code amendment in your packet, and that code amendment will be reviewed in due time. This has not been approved on the fly. You'll go through the normal code amendment process in order to allow this creative solution to come forward if that's what you decide to do.
Okay, thanks.
Who's speaking? Mayor, who is speaking?
Let me let me suggest where we are procedurally, and then offer some thoughts to both my fellow councilors and Bach. So,
Bill, can you just identify who was speaking?
Jody.
Jody.
Jody, I'm sorry, Jody Edwards was counselor for Possum Co. was just speaking. So.
Hand up as well for public comment. Just Craig on there.
Okay, let's take that. Who is it?
Just Craig
Okay.
has his hand up. But
Was that the gentleman you were just trying to acknowledge,
Yes.
James? Okay. All right,
Hello.
sir, you got the floor.
My name is Jess Craig. I'm a resident on Soapfish Circle that backs up to Willits. I was talking with some of my neighbors, and we're concerned about the traffic. We understand there was a traffic study made or proposed, and we don't know the status of that traffic proposal. Our concern is the traffic that comes from 82 down Willits Lane and goes back into 82 near the FedEx facility. I think Michael had some very, very valid points that he made. I'd like to see his proposal. I don't know if it's available on the website or where we could look at it, but I would be very interested in looking at it because I think there were some very, very fine points. But again, our concern is the traffic, and is there a proposal? Is there a traffic study? Has one been done? When will it be done, et cetera? Thank you very much.
Okay. Let me just respond quickly, Jess. So procedurally, we're going to address affordable housing component in concept tonight. That's going to be volleyed back to our planning commission. Then it's going to come back, and we will be revisiting this project in its entire scope, from housing to transportation and circulation and all of the individual components of review at another time. So stay tuned. There's going to be plenty of opportunity to comment on the site plan at future meetings. But let me recap for you why I think we got to where we are here tonight. And it came from the preliminary plan submission for Phase 5 Soapfish Meadows, which for affordable housing contained a proposal to build all Category 2 rental housing. And the response we got from Bach and from many in the community was that, hey, we had done extremely well on rental housing, and we've done a poor job of providing ownership housing. So we probed the possibility of asking the applicant to reconsider the affordable housing mix and come back with some affordable ownership housing. Well, it came back 100% ownership, and we haven't made any judgment about that. Basically, we just received the application. So the question I guess would have to my fellow councilors and maybe to Bach is that if we were to land on an arrangement whereby we have 23 units of ownership housing and subject to further discussion about these categories and the price thresholds and the AMI considerations that Mr. Kozrowski outlined. So those are not cooked by any means yet. So what we have is an applicant proposal before us. So I wouldn't get too far ahead kind of pointing fingers at the council about this represents no approval on our end at all. So, and then what we might do for building 2 is address rental housing in category 2 or category 3, whatever we think is appropriate, in the second building. So there's an element of this that is going to be very difficult for our council, the way it stands right now, is that there is no scenario under which I think we can go forward with any affordable housing program that fundamentally doesn't meet our code as drafted, not with a code amendment that's hanging out there. So what I would offer up as one individual, and we're all, everybody on council will get a chance to speak on this, is that we go forward back to Planning Commission with a proposal that would have 23 units of ownership housing based on some mix of categories, and 23 rental units. And that's the way we have the wisdom of Solomon here. We basically have half rental and half ownership, and it's the way you get things done, I think, politically. So let me get comments from council first about that, see if there's any consensus in our group. And if there is, we'll ask for some commentary, brief commentary from Bach. Then we'll take action to send this back to Planning Commission. So councilors, what do you think of that idea? Have at it. David.
I appreciate Bach's insight and all the comments and the perspective. I think it's always good to have, like I said, as a bunch, divergent viewpoints, and hearing, another group, especially one like you guys who are kind of living and breathing this stuff on an ongoing basis. I too am supportive of a category 2 second building with rental. I think that's the right thing to do, but I don't think it diminishes what we're going to get in building 1. I think that's going to be a really great asset for our affordable housing inventory, and I would just like though to see us meet the minimum code requirements, like Bill said, with building 2.
I'm in line with, the minimum code requirements need to be addressed. And I believe building 1 would do that as rental. But I think that, again, the opportunity for the ownership on building 2 is, it's a really good deal. Obviously there's details to be worked out, but.
Go for it.
Oh, I also wanted to thank Bach, and you've obviously put a lot of time and attention into this. I don't think that our intention ever was to proceed with 2 buildings for purchase housing, but upon our first reading, when the community came and talked to the council, what we heard from the community is that people in Basalt do want the opportunity to purchase a home for themselves at an affordable price point, and the feedback that we got was that with all the rental housing that we currently have and that we have coming in the pipeline, people feel like, you can rent in Basalt until you're ready to buy, and then you have to go somewhere else. I think that for purchase housing over in this development is completely appropriate for just the 1 building, and I agree that I don't want to proceed with anything that doesn't meet our town code requirement.
Glenn?
I'd like to, thank you guys on Bach for everything you do. We can't proceed without a meeting code amendment. That's obvious. But I do think that we've got to look at a big picture of this. Like, this is not your typical community housing, which is, even that definition when we had our work session together, we all talked about community housing, employee housing, what's more important, what does it mean, and I know we never landed on that. But these units are of decent size, they're of high quality, and so, it seems to me we could find a balance, between the whole deal. I'm in favor of as many ownership units as possible, just because that's important to people. And I think changing some of the, community housing requirements or some of the stuff in the code as far as like the appreciation caps are probably something we should look at. Because if your mortgage rate's 6% and you get 3% appreciation, it's still not working. But you can still manage to make a program. We all know that APSHA is not perfect, and we know that the Valley's not perfect in doing it, so that's where it's gonna require unique and creative solutions to get community housing that is purchasable for everybody. So I think we all gotta have a little bit of an open mind on like, how can we come to a good solution? And as Bill said, this isn't the end of the road.
Anyone else on council, Elise?
First of all, just a point of clarification, and James can probably fill us in, but I know at least 56 units of our 208 rental units are Basalt residents have the highest priority. That's the Roaring Fork Apartments where I live. It's also in Pickens County, so it does fall under APSHA rules, I believe.
The 56 units do have Basalt employees as a first priority, and then most of the other affordable housing projects as well have Basalt employees as a first priority, and then it kind of waterfalls down to, if we don't have somebody that's working in Basalt that's interested, then it goes down to between Aspen and Glenwood ultimately.
Okay, thank you, James. I also want to thank Bach for the hard work that they've done. And I want to acknowledge that you are not the first committee who has been frustrated with us for changing our minds, shall we say. So I want to acknowledge that, you know, we do kind of play fast and loose sometimes, and it doesn't mean that we don't value the work that you do. So I just want to put that out there. As all of my fellow counselors know, I am not in favor of the 200% and 250%. In fact, I would rather see 100% AMI housing, for purchase housing, rather than the rentals, to be perfectly honest. I don't know if there is any leeway in that conversation still, but those are my thoughts.
I'd like to really dig down into the proposed amendments, because you start reading it and I think we're gonna open Pandora's box. When you declare a resident occupied unit, that's something someone has to live in at least 9 months out of the year. That just all of a sudden becomes, then are they in Mexico for 3 months out of the year? Is it not really doing the property? It's more of a town thing, but if we are making these amendments, we're gonna really have to dive deep into them, because they're not.
But if we use building 2 to meet 100% of the code, then that eliminates the need for the code amendment. That code amendment is strictly in there to.
But that's for resident occupied. We're gonna create something as a town, and I do not want to have the same thing Aspen has. It means well, but it creates something that's not what we should be doing as a town of Basalt. We need to be doing stuff for Basalt, not for. But that's in a deeper dive. I mean, I'd apologize to Bach too. I understand how you feel. I felt that way before when I was on planning and zoning, and that's why I'm up here. So I would encourage all of you to run for council next time. And I think we were addressing basically a conversation between ourselves, knowing that you guys had addressed it. I'm torn. I think Michael presents a very good case against affordable for purchase housing, and I'm on that stand too. So, but I think this is a happy medium. I don't know if the developer's interested in doing a 50-50 split. I think that kind of ruins the HOA he was just talking about, but obviously this is going to have to be continued.
Well, and is it worthwhile just to circumvent making a code change?
Yeah. So, you know, basically, if we do category 2 and 3 rentals in building 2, that completely satisfies our code requirement, then we don't need a code amendment to authorize the ownership housing in building 1.
Yeah, but you still have to have rules on ownership housing. That's the problem.
Yeah. I mean, we could certainly just stipulate them, but it's not. So, all right, let me ask if there's any brief feedback from Bach based on our proposal to propose that building 2 become rental and that be served back to planning commission is going to want to see some kind of definitive proposal before they can take action. So do you guys have any thoughts, reactions to the idea of making building 2 rental and working some more on these price guidelines on the sale product for building 1? Does that get us further along? Kathy, why don't you go first? You're the spokesperson.
I think that when we had taken a vote and made recommendations to the town council, we approved and recommended that AH1, which at that time was the rental housing unit, be approved, and the AH2, which was the new for sale category 4, 5, and 6, or 3, 4, and 5 housing. We did not make a recommendation on that proposal. I think that part of our concern is that now referring to the rental units as AH2 indicates that that's the second building that would be built, and that is going to be, according to the proposal, that would be adjusted based on the market. And I think that as our code stands, and as part of the tools that we're given to review projects, we were supporting the mitigated housing. And that is the rental housing. I don't think that we have made a determination as a group as to how we feel about for sale housing. That is because we have not been able to, because we don't have those tools to do it. So our feeling is that the AH1 rental mitigated housing should be built first, and that was our recommendation. And I think that if that is what you're proposing, that it gets built first, and that's the sequence of events, and that AH2 becomes a project that is reviewed and massaged over time to figure out exactly what the category caps are, what the asset caps are, all of the other proposals that are in there, then as long as we would be able to review that again when it comes time to build that second building, that I would be in favor of that. I don't know how my other board members feel, but
Yeah, let me
given the
try
fact
to,
that our
let me try to manage this
code
from a
says we need mitigated housing, then I would support rental housing in AH1.
Okay, so, is there any on Bach that has a view that's radically different than Kathy's statement that we build category 2 housing rental in building 1, and then we use the luxury of time to configure some sensible sale product in the second building? Does that sound like the consensus from Bach?
Yes, without going and changing the mitigation and inclusionary housing requirements to meet this modified proposal, yes, I think that would be the right approach, because we're sticking to the code, and hopefully we can negotiate something with, you'll be able to hopefully negotiate something with the developer that will give you a little bit more time, and could be either rental or ownership, but give you more time to determine what is in the best interest. Because I would agree with Councilor Slack that our housing code and our housing guidelines are not ready for ownership. And there are a lot of drawbacks that I don't think have been discussed to date.
Okay, thank you. Doug, your thoughts, or anyone else? Ann, does that sound like a proper course to take here? Okay.
I agree.
Okay, so we got to bring some oxygen in here for the applicant. They're kind of like, they're trying to figure out what we're doing here. So, Jody, go ahead.
Sure. Based on what I'm hearing, what I'm going to go back and recommend to Michael is forget about all this.
Forget about what?
Forget about all this creative solutions.
Okay.
Just, this is way more complicated than it needs to be. We'll meet the minimums. We'll get you 23, whether they're rental or ownership, whatever you want, affordable housing units, deed restricted, category 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever the requirements are, done. And then I'm going to tell him, if you got another building that you want to do whatever the heck you want to do in, whether it's RO, whether it's missing middle, whatever you want to call it, do it on your own. Because it's going to be, what I'm hearing is that this is unbelievably complicated, much more so than it should be. And that, you know, just meet the code, meet the minimums, and go take the other building, do whatever you
But
want. That's what I'm going
you
to
would
tell them
have
when we
you
go
would
meet
have to-
tomorrow.
You have to recognize that that is a blatant bait and switch. I mean, we've been offered 46 units of affordable housing based on our code, and because you're confronted with some complexity, you're going to just withdraw 23 units. We're back to scratch here. I mean, that's ridiculous.
But I don't think it's based on our code. Like, that was, I mean, I remember when we had this discussion, it was like, we didn't want to lose the 46 units. Because if it was based on our code, they would have never proposed 46 units.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that
That's
was part of the conversation,
that's-
is like us working together to get the greatest community benefit we could have possibly gotten at the time. And we can't forget that part. That was what our conversation was.
That's the conversation we've been having from day one. He's exactly right. We can create a creative way to get you more than what the code says, but if that's impossible, which is almost what I'm hearing tonight, then, okay, we'll meet the code.
So the only thing that
Well,
changed
then-
here is we're proposing that the second building be rental and that it be built first. And you're withdrawing that.
No, I'm not withdrawing anything. I'm just telling you what, as an advisor, I'm gonna go advise him tomorrow. He hasn't withdrawn anything.
Well, I guess what I don't understand is
As far as
what
switching-
conversation happened here that is causing you to react in this way?
I guess for me, I'm just profoundly disappointed because I have tried to make every effort I can to do the best possible project. And I thought I heard the last time the first building was approved at the category levels. Now I understand that's not the case. And this is a process that I really wish that 9 months ago I'd just done what the code says. And I've spent 25 years on this project, and it's always been a process of invention. And it's a PUD. The idea that the underlying things can't be adjusted means, you know, you can't get smarter. And I'm really concerned about the missing middle. I think I can do the community much more benefit following Jody's advice in doing an RO project, looking at the categories I care about, because I feel strongly, and when somebody says we don't have a middle income housing problem in this community, and you look at there's nothing under $1 million literally available, we have a problem. And I'd like to be recreating this community with a product that the kind of people that live here today could afford to live in and would want to live in, and that's not what I'm hearing. And I also, you know, when I'm hearing this, well, let's do 50-50, it's still only a fraction, even if they're all for sale, of what the town inventory is. Because what I heard you say, Bill, we need this to be sale housing. So I thought it was great we were coming in and proposing it's all sale, and we're trying to, you know, I've lived in Aspen and I have watched that missing middle disappear. And I know that there's plenty of category 2 housing available for Basalt today. You just got to ask the people in Aspen to leave.
So, but Jody, the untenable position that you put us in is if your only proposal is the 23 ownership units with categories 2 through 6, which does not meet our code, you're asking us to take action on the final plan with a housing proposal that doesn't meet our affordable housing requirements in our code. That's not a tenable situation.
Then I misspoke, because that's not what I meant to say. What I meant to say is, I've heard both from on the screen and in here that the code is what has to be satisfied.
True.
I'm saying, fine, we'll satisfy the code.
Okay.
And I want to point out section 16-415, mitigation methods in the code, and everybody should really read that, because this is our code. I mean, the code is
We're
not
trying to do
like
more than what's in
just
the code.
100% this.
I'm well aware of it. So we're getting a little bit of a cart before the horse here. So basically all we're trying to resolve tonight is that you've heard from council, we've got some feedback from our Bach group. We're going to serve this back to the planning commission. You're going to have some time before them to sort through this. and it's gonna come back to us, and we'll see
I'm not sure
something
that-
further resolved.
Procedurally, where are we?
Mayor,
Yeah, I don't
Jeff
know.
Conklin's got his hand up.
Good.
Would you like
Hey, Jeff, why don't you weigh in here?
Hi, everyone. Thanks. James, I was just going to ask for you, if you could, to clarify what was in the preliminary plan approval, and then also to clarify kind of how we've laid this out procedurally. I mean, I believe our preliminary plan approval was for approval of the project with 30% of the residential units and 20% of the floor area to be deed restricted price capped units with these two 23-unit buildings, the first of which would be resident occupied with the categories that were presented in the proposal at our last meeting. The second 23 units were going to be subject to future determination by town council at this final plan review. That approval was also subject to the approval of a code amendment to, you know, as we've discussed, and that code amendment has been applied for. So this, and I guess I'm answering my own questions, but I just want to make sure that we have, you know, I just want, James, I just like for you to make sure that that is jives with on your end. But then procedurally, we have a final plan application submitted, and this is because we wanted to ensure that Bach was included in the process as part of that final plan review, and to have some opinion on this second building of 23 units. We're having this discussion tonight to allow that to be done together prior to proceeding to Planning Commission and then back to Town Council. So I just wanted to kind of hit those 2 points, and James, if I stated any of that incorrectly, just please clarify that for council.
No, your discussion on the preliminary plan approval is accurate in terms of the resa. And your statement on the procedure is staff's understanding as well.
Okay, so basically, staff has heard the discussion. I would entertain a motion from council to table action on first reading and refer the application back to Planning Commission for review with more detail for affordable housing. And, you know, don't have a cow here. We'll figure this out, but, you know.
What are we asking P&Z to do?
P&Z is going to, with staff, is going to, with Bach, review the various alternatives for affordable housing and make a recommendation back to us.
And the suggested motion
We
is
just
just to continue the public hearing, right? That's right.
Pardon?
The suggested motion here, to continue the
Yeah.
public hearing. So I'll make that motion. Mayor, I move that the town council continue the public hearing to July 26, 2022.
Okay, been moved, second?
I don't feel like we're ready.
Yeah, I mean, I can say that.
Not ready to table the application?
Well, I just don't think that we really
We can
solved.
continue it again, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Proceed, you know.
But I feel like we haven't given any clear direction what we want.
And the downside is like, when we approved the preliminary plan, and now they're back for final, like, we approved what we approved. That happened.
Okay, I'll withdraw my motion. Let's talk about it.
Again, my proposal is that what we refer to the Planning Commission is a plan to accept the proposal for ownership housing in Building 1 and stipulate 23 units of rental housing, Category 2, Category 3, whatever we think is appropriate for that, and that be the consideration that Planning Commission takes up. And they'll have plenty of time to weigh it with Bach, and they'll either come back with that, with the recommendation to go forward with that proposal or not, so.
I have a question to the applicant, if that's even of interest to them, because that's not.
Sorry, again?
I would ask you if that's even of interest to you guys, because we are going around in a circle here.
We're going around in circles, and all we kept hearing from Bach, staff, and P&Z is this is political, and we have to see what council wants to do. Bach felt their hands were tied. I read it differently. I thought they were there to be creative and come up with some new solutions, and, you know, that's what a PUD process is. But, you know, I think we've heard what Bach thinks. We've heard what you've asked for. And now I feel like we're in the middle of, a circular conversation. And I do think not a bad solution is for us to do the RO. We'll work on some standards with that, but we won't put the city in the position of having to monitor that. But we'll agree who RO would qualify to. We can discuss caps on that, but we'll just sort of do it, not as part of your program, but part of something that helps build that middle class, because for me, that's what we don't have. That's what you guys aren't addressing. That's the town's absolute biggest problem. There is no shortage of Category 2, but there's right now nothing a very high percentage of the current population of Basalt could afford. And my goal has been to try to do something that allows Basalt to stay Basalt and not become Aspen. So I'm trying to create a product, whether it's 200%, 250%, 300%, we are losing our middle class here. And you guys, you can say, oh, we're not ready to do it, we have to do it in a future project. I think you should look at how many opportunities you have left to address the missing middle class and use your deed restrictions to create the community you want to look at. And I got to say it, your code be damned, everything else be damned. You have, Basalt's all of a sudden like a startup. It's changing faster than anybody can keep up with. And you guys got to get ahead of this thing, or you're going to look back and say, Christ, we could have 23 more families living in this town that are of Basalt rather than continuing to create workforce housing for a community and a valley that simply ought to stop growing anyhow. We don't have the employees we need. The best way to slow things down is to slow down the workforce that Aspen will continually ask for and pay for. And they're already starting to buy the free market housing here. So, you guys are going to make the decision, but I gotta say, you are not taking care of your town when you make those decisions. I've been watching this planning process for a long time.
Michelle, go ahead.
Jeff has his hand up.
That's it,
Jeff.
Jeff, and then I just have one more question.
Go ahead, Jeff.
That may have still been up from before,
Okay.
but in any event, I think that
Having some fun here.
there, again, the two final comments is that that preliminary plan approval was for the 46 units, with 23 of them ownership units with those category deed restrictions. There are not any category 2 deed restrictions. And I think maybe kind of where this discussion is kind of, there's been some confusion as to whether or not this component of review was to determine from a blank, on a blank paper, what building 2 should look like in terms of the rental mix or an ownership mix, or whether or not it would be ownership units that are comprised of lower category units. And, if that is the proposal of all ownership units, that's why there's the accompanying code amendment. And so there may just be some confusion as to kind of where that discussion lies. And then, if there was to be a change in the number of units being proposed as part of the project, I'll have to discuss that with Jody, but that would certainly be a material departure from what was submitted in the application, and might be some procedural issues there.
Okay.
Mayor,
Michelle,
I'd
did you
like
have
to
something?
state a point on behalf of Bach, please.
Michelle, did you have a comment?
Just to follow up with what Jeff said, if you want to move forward with the second building, we'll call it for now, as averaging category 2 units as rental, that'll satisfy the mitigation requirement, and you can move forward with the preliminary approval that you spoke about last time with the higher category units. So that would be a direction you could send staff forward with, and would help P&Z move forward into final plan review.
So our action would be to basically continue the public hearing, refer this back to the Planning Commission. The staff would summarize the choices that are before us.
Correct.
Category 2 rental housing is building 1, and then player to be tamed later in terms of the ownership housing in building 2, or accept the ownership housing in 1, and then rental in 2, and the code amendment. So they're the choices that are before us. And I thought that the arrangement tonight was for us to hear from Bach, give, our planning commission some flavor of the direction that we're looking for them to munch over. So this is gonna go back to them. They're gonna have that consideration. It's gonna come back to us. Then we're gonna have this conversation again after we've had our planning commission with an opportunity to weigh in on this.
Can I ask one more question?
Go ahead.
Would you entertain the idea of 150% of AMI?
No. And I only mean that
I mean,
because.
but we've already got 9 in that category.
Well, I guess let me think about that.
So you're already entertaining
But
it.
I guess, yeah, all I'm saying is, I just know so many people that aren't gonna qualify for these lower guidelines that ought to be living in this community. Landscape architects, 2 school teachers. The core of our community is our middle income community, and it's true of almost every place everywhere. They're the people that get things done, they get on, they volunteer at school, they do all those things that make Basalt Basalt. But I think you ought to just ask the people you think are great Basalt community members and ask them how much they could afford to spend on a house. And think about where they're gonna go and the people that aren't gonna come here if we don't try to figure out what goes on between category 2 and literally $1 million. And I don't think we should be punishing people and say they're not welcome in Basalt if you make $250,000 a year as a couple, or $300,000 or $350,000. This is your chance to compose the community you want. And right now, all this board has done is subsidized affordable housing for largely, a certain kind of person that we need in this valley, but you have done nothing to preserve the community that has
You're
historically
gonna have an
lived
opportunity to
here.
make that presentation to our planning commission.
I'm sorry?
You're gonna have an opportunity to make that presentation to our planning commission, and their recommendation's gonna come back to us, and then we'll sort through this.
But I gotta say, they've been looking to you, and they never understand the extent to which they're hamstrung by the code. It just hasn't been a satisfying process for Bach, but it hasn't been for me. I thought they were there to help look at what's happening today, not when you wrote the code, and what we know is gonna happen in the future, and none of that is part of the process. So far, it's all backwards looking at a code that was written in the past, and you have a crisis in this town. And I think you guys ought to rethink what most of you just said about what your responsibility is to the community that actually voted you into office.
I don't think we need that lecture tonight, Michael.
I'm sorry, Bill.
That's
I'm
a little off,
obviously
that's
I'm
kind of
frustrated.
off base here. We don't need civics 101 here.
Mayor, am I on?
That's the direction.
Didn't even get voted in?
Is that they don't have direction from us.
I think that this joint meeting tonight, having Bach here, was very helpful. I think they're able to describe what they wanted to get across and their concerns. I haven't heard that P&Z is conflicted. That's not what I've heard so far, but I think everyone is looking forward to this process going on. This going from sketch plan review through preliminary plan to final plan is a long process. So the more direction we can get to getting to final, the better. And if I may summarize what I think I'm hearing is that we want to pursue meeting the code mitigation requirements in one of the buildings and following up with the proposal that was approved in preliminary on the other building, and then allow P&Z to massage and review from there.
I mean, me personally, I want to see the greatest community benefit we can get out of this housing.
Of course, yeah.
That's how I look at it. And part of our code does say it doesn't have to be based on numbers.
So we'll get to where you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying, Michael. I think, it is time for us to revisit some of these housing codes. And it's not fair that Bach, is a little bit hamstrung by them.
But I don't think they should feel hamstrung. Come up with the ideas, give a proposal, get with the developer, and instead of just saying it's gotta be this, come up with what you guys feel is comfortable and present it. And let's go there. Let's look at it in that manner.
I think we've submitted
That's
4
great, but we don't
proposals
really
so-
have that. That's not in our purview. Give it to us, we'll take it. But that is not and has not been how we've been able to operate.
And if I may, folks. I just want to push back on Michael a little bit because I think it's an unfair representation that he makes with respect to Bach from the outset, because we were given, and I want to be clear with the public listening to this and everybody in the room there and the council members as well as the applicant, there's Affordable Housing 1 and there's Affordable Housing 2 buildings. Affordable Housing 1 was always intended, as we understood it, to be the mitigation, the inclusionary housing based on the existing code. Affordable Housing 2 was where we were going to get creative. That Mike was like, we want to work with you, Bach, to be creative. But this was strictly on Affordable Housing 2, not on Affordable Housing Building 1. So what I'm hearing is that we're now getting thrown under the bus, Bach is, by the applicant saying that, well, we couldn't make up our minds. Well, we did. I put it, and in all fairness to Michael and to his proposal, I agree with a lot of what he has to say. However, I think he takes it too far, and so does the Bach committee. What he defines as missing middle is really not missing middle, and it's well above middle income housing, and as defined by AMI, as I talked about earlier. But I put it, like I mentioned in my earlier comments, I put a motion on the table, we discussed it, it was based on a rental project, allowing up to 200% of AMI. The applicant rejected that. So, that was a compromise that I put forward. Again, I didn't have the support of my fellow members, but again, I understand we have to have more discussion about this. But again, going back to this idea that we were unclear, or at least with respect to Affordable Housing 2, we were working with the applicant all along, and we were not delaying this process because we went ahead and improved Affordable Housing 1, the mitigation as required, and we were trying to have that secondary conversation on Affordable Housing 2. So I just want to correct the record.
I think we're there. I want to come back to, there's a motion on the table to continue the public hearing to July 26, 2022, after this application with direction and options and support from staff to Planning Commission. And then we'll take this back up again on July 26th. That motion's on the table.
I did withdraw it, but I'll make it again here
Okay.
really quick. Mayor, I move that the town council continue the public hearing to July 26, 2022.
Second. Okay, been moved and second. Pam, we better call the roll on this one.
Okay. All right, let's begin with Dieter Schindler,
Yes.
David Knight,
Yes.
Angela Anderson,
Yes.
Glenn Drummond,
Yes.
Elise Hoddle,
Yes, but I think we need to have a conversation about our housing code separate from an development application.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's no doubt true.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
and Bill Kane.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, we'll see you next time. And
Thank you.
good luck with Planning Commission. I'm sure it'll go well.
Thank you, Bill.
We'll try it again. Thank you all. Whatever you got cracking, good. I'm passionate about this, so.
Okay, well, that was easy. What else we got here? Are you recusing yourself?
I am recusing myself.
Okay. So the next order of business for this evening is our agenda item 6C. This has actually two parts. The first is the public hearing and first reading on ordinance number 14, series of 2022, an ordinance of the Town Council, Town of Basalt, Colorado, approving rezoning to the community serving CSC zone district, CSC final plan application review, and associated development review actions to construct a grocery store and 67 residential apartment units and associated improvements on lots A and E of the Basalt Center subdivision. James, and good evening to all.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you. As the mayor indicated, staff is suggesting taking the next two items together as they're related. And as the mayor introduced, the first item is a public hearing and first reading of an ordinance that would approve of a final CSC site plan review, as well as rezoning to the CSC zone district and associated reviews for the redevelopment of the BCC property. And then the second item is first reading of a code amendment to the CSC zone district that was submitted by BCC LLC. And the overall proposal is to demolish the existing building at 140 Basalt Center Circle and construct a new mixed-use building with a 9,000 square foot grocery store, including a liquor store, and 67 apartments on the upper 2 floors. The sketch plan approval was granted by the council pursuant to resolution number 38, series of 2021. The subject site, as has been introduced at prior meetings, is known as the BCC property. It includes the vacant commercial space that previously housed Clark's Market and Habitat Restore, as well as the commercial spaces that currently house Jimbo's Liquor, BLT, and the decorative materials space. It contains a parking lot that is commonly owned by the Owners Association. And the proposal, as noted, is to remove the existing building, construct a new 9,000 square foot grocery on the first floor, 67 apartments on the upper 2 floors, and an at-grade parking structure, as you can see here, just to the east of the grocery. The applicants are also proposing to reconfigure the existing common parking lot, as you can see it here, wrap around the proposed building. They're proposing to include a patio area in the front of the grocery store near the entrance for seating and other activities. And they've also proposed to improve the pedestrian access throughout the parking lot with additional crosswalks and throughout the project. The site is currently zoned C2, but is proposed to be rezoned to the CSC zone district as part of the process. The review process that is before the council includes actions being requested for rezoning to the CSC zone district, CSC final plan review, as well as the code amendments to the CSC zone district to allow for the council to provide waivers to requiring the pedestrian connections to Midland Avenue as well as to the river, as the applicants don't control that property adjacent to Midland Avenue or the river. The actions being requested require town council approval after a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission. So this evening, staff recommends hearing an update to the discussion items that were brought up at the sketch plan level from staff, and then taking applicant comments and public comments because it is a public hearing, and then providing council discussion on the project. Regarding the discussion items, they were provided in your packet and were provided at the sketch plan level. They include consistency with the master plan. The property is one of the primary properties that was identified in the 2020 master plan. Was provided a density range of between 52 and 134 dwelling units in the master plan, which the proposed 67 units is within that range. There were several separate redevelopment scenarios that were proposed, and the applicant's development scenario is most like the retail anchor that was in the master plan that you see up here on the screen, as it includes redevelopment in basically the existing footprint of the building. The redevelopment of this property was one of the 13 projects that were identified in the master plan, as you can see here on the screen with the excerpt from the master plan. In terms of consistency with the CSC zone district, the proposal is consistent with the dimensional requirements of the CSC zone district, with the exception that they cannot provide the pedestrian connections to the river and Midland Avenue, as is required in the CSC zone district, as they do not control those properties adjacent to the Midland Avenue corridor, as well as adjacent to the river. And so they've asked for the code amendment to the CSC zone district to allow for the waiver. Additionally, they have reached out to the neighboring property owners to see if they could get the ability to have a pedestrian connection to Midland Avenue, and it was declined. Other discussion topics that came up at the preliminary plan and sketch plan levels was the grocery composition. There was a lot of discussion at the sketch plan level about the grocery composition. Staff had worked with Don Elliott of Clarion and Associates and the applicants to develop basic parameters around the grocery store and came up with a definition that's in your packet for the grocery store. It provides parameters that at least 70% of the retail space be for primary goods that you would find in a grocery store. At the sketch plan level, many of the P&Z and council members had some interest in providing flexibility for it to act somewhat as a food hall or also to be a standard grocery store. So staff and the P&Z felt that the definition provides that flexibility. On other topics that were discussion items, the affordable housing, community housing portion of the project, the applicants originally proposed 15% of the total units to be deed restricted as part of their sketch plan level, along with providing a 1.5% real estate transfer assessment. But during the sketch plan process, the applicants increased the percentage to provide 25% of the units as deed restricted affordable housing, as well as they also maintained the 1.5% RETA that was part of the proposal. So the 25% of the total units being deed restricted housing equals 17 units, and that's in the final plan application. The applicants also at the sketch plan level offered up that 60% of the units would be for tenants that would occupy the units as their primary residence, and that 100% of the units would have a 6-month minimum lease term to them. This has been carried over into the final plan application, and it's consistent with the preliminary the sketch plan approvals. Bach reviewed the proposal as part of the final plan review and recommended approval with the conditions that you have in your ordinance. In terms of the architecture and the typologies that are included in the master plan, the CSC zone district requires upper floor to be set back as is shown here and provided in the project. As was noted, the applicant, as part of the sketch plan review, reduced the overall project from 4 stories to 3, and they've set back the upper floor. There's also requirements that the project contains simple building forms, and that's part of the R-Town Vitality Zone requirements. Staff believes that they've achieved it with the proposed project. Other topics for discussion include access and parking. From the sketch plan approval, the applicants have had to make some adjustments to the overall site plan in the parking lot. They had to reconfigure the parking due to issues with fire district access. And so they've changed the overall layout of the parking to meet the fire district's access requirements. It still yields 128 parking spaces for the project, which includes the 58 at-grade surface parking in the parking garage, as well as 58 parking spaces, and so 70 total in the common parking lot, 16 of which are to serve the residential units on the upper floors. In total, the parking that's proposed meets the CSC zone district's parking requirements, and that's reiterated in the conditions in your proposed ordinance. Other topics that came up during the sketch plan review as well as the final plan review included pedestrian access and the Parks, Open Space and Trails Committee's comments. The applicants have improved the pedestrian connections through the common parking lot, as you can see here, with considerable crosswalk additions. In the sketch plan review, the Parks, Open Space and Trails Committee had recommended providing raised crosswalks throughout the parking lot. The applicants were not able to do raised crosswalks. However, they have proposed to provide colored concrete crosswalks throughout the project, and the applicants can speak more to that. But it was noted that the neighbors would not accept a connection to Midland Avenue in that area. Overall, Post was still supportive of the final plan application with the colored concrete crosswalks. It was also noted that they've provided crosswalks and better pedestrian access to the rest of the Basalt Center Circle area as well, to the west. I'm sorry, to the east. Additionally, other topics included ADA accessibility. The applicants have proposed to add a ramp down to the parking lot from Two Rivers Road, as well as an ADA path coming from the corner of Midland Avenue and Two Rivers Road to access the front of the grocery store. Other topics included the loading area. The applicants have still proposed to provide the loading area as it was set up for City Market and Clark's Market before them in the same area between the gas station and the grocery store. The applicants have improved the access into the loading area. They ran auto turn analysis and did some engineering. It adjusted the patio area slightly from the sketch plan level, and the applicants can speak to that a bit. In terms of green building and infrastructure, they're proposing to meet the sustainable building regulations, and the residential component is proposed to be 100% electric. They've also proposed to provide electric car charging stations as well as e-bike charging in the project, and that's included and reiterated in the draft conditions of approval. Other more technical topics related to the project, the sanitary sewer service. The sanitation district is studying the capacity of the lines serving the property. They indicated that the sewer plant has the capacity to serve the project, but they're trying to determine whether the lines are being infiltrated by groundwater and causing issues related to maintenance. So that study's ongoing. We should have a final kind of say on that or some response before the council takes a final action on the project. Other topics include the WeCycle. We received comments from WeCycle originally that they wanted to have the ability to have a WeCycle station somewhere in the area near the front door. It was discussed with staff and the applicant, and there was a thought that there's really not room up here to have a WeCycle station in addition to all the other uses like the seating that is proposed for that area. So staff had further discussions with WeCycle, and they accepted keeping the WeCycle station out here adjacent to Two Rivers Road, and they accepted having an additional WeCycle pad in the island area. And so there are funds that are required through the green initiatives that are part of the conditions that could potentially fund that additional WeCycle station. Other topics that came up at the P&Z's review at the final plan included the anchor use and whether the should be a process for changing the anchor use in the future if it would be needed by the applicants. The P&Z recommended having a process that the applicants would have to come back for review if they wanted to change the anchor use from a grocery store to another anchor use. You can see how the anchor uses are set up in the town code. The P and Z recommended that the applicant would have to come back for the anchor use review if they wanted to change it. There is an alternative condition in the ordinance that council could provide if council wanted the applicant to have the flexibility just to change anchor uses amongst these allowed anchor uses. And so that could be a discussion topic for the council. And then finally, other discussion items were the timing for providing the grocery store. At the sketch plan level, there was a condition that the applicants had to get the CO on the core and shell of the grocery store prior to or concurrent to getting a CO on the residential units on the upper floors. And then also to provide a financial security to finish out the grocery store core and shell prior to getting the CO on the residential units. That has been carried over in your draft conditions of approval in condition number 4. The P&Z did kick around the idea of whether, because we have such a housing problem, that they should just go ahead and allow for the residential units to get a CO without a tie to the grocery store being finalized. They ultimately recommended the condition that you have in the reso that requires the tie between the grocery store space and the residential COs. But that could be a discussion item for the council as well. This evening, staff would recommend taking public applicant comments on the proposal and then taking public comments and providing council discussion. If you're comfortable with the conditions in the draft ordinance for the development review, you could ultimately approve it on first reading. And once again, there's a second ordinance for code amendments that is also being considered on first reading. We have the applicants here this evening, and it looks like we're losing our feed. But we've got Tim Belinsky and Andrew Light representing the applicant team. Guys, do you have some comments for the council?
We do. Well, brief comments. First off, I want to say I'm Andrew Light. Thank you for taking the time and energy to review this again. Welcome Dieter and Angela to the process. Welcome Michelle. I don't think you were here for the last town council round, but we had a very good, since being approved, it's sketched in November, we had a good process through Planning and Zoning Commission. James summarized a lot of the topics, but we also heard a number of comments from the public that generally focused on a few topics, and so tonight we're really going to aim for the issues that I think people have had a harder time understanding, because there's really 4 key issues that we want to make sure are backed up with information and data, and I think our team's done a very good job explaining it, but I'll let them summarize it. But generally, parking we're making better by adding a lot of spaces, more than are there now. Better instead of the commercial building as is there now. Traffic, since sketch plan, we did a traffic study, which CDOT, I will let Heather summarize, but CDOT was very comfortable with, and it was a significant reduction in traffic versus the existing buildings. And we also, the consistency with the master plan, this is really what was envisioned when the zoning overlay was approved unanimously a few years ago. This was the exact project that, we feel like this was the exact project that was invited by the master plan. And so Heather was very involved in that, could speak to that. And finally, housing, I think it's clear we responded at sketch plan to the request that came out, and so we've gone above and beyond in the housing. So I'll let Heather take it from here, but those are really the 4 points we want to make sure we are clear tonight.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, Heather Henry, Connect One Design. You guys are just going one to the next, not even a breather. So, yes, we would like to review the changes to the project, talk about the master plan, talk a little bit about the canvas that we were given, and what we think is a really well-balanced and kind of kick-ass project that we've painted on this canvas. And then go through some of the issues that we've heard, okay? So traffic, parking, housing / affordability, and then I also have kind of the building height and fit contextually into the community on my list. So James, next slide. And can I use your pointer? Not that I'll use it, but I like to have something to fiddle with. So what hasn't changed? So really the vision of the project has not changed, right? So we, in the CSC zone district, it talked about being able to bring a grocer back to downtown Basalt, so that has not changed. We've got residential above, talking and really pushing the affordability of that product. So it has not changed. We are reducing the traffic demand from the existing condition, and we are increasing the availability of parking in this private HOA parking lot. And then just overall, from kind of the site perspective, we are still improving the conditions that you see out there. So the connectivity, the creation of gathering spaces, et cetera. So that has not changed. Next slide. We'll talk a little bit about what has changed. So, thanks and kudos to P&Z, to this council, some new members, some existing, Bach, Post, and the community. We've received a ton of feedback. And you will see that feedback reflected in these changes. So our height has gone from 4-story to 3-story. Now that said, Basalt, as its nature, we have heard both, this is vanilla and you should have gone bigger and better and higher aspirational, and we have heard, we can't take 4 stories, it should be less. So again, we think by going to 3 stories and the project you see in front of you, we've found that sweet spot. Tim and Andrew, kind of working through the rent capped units and the affordability, have gone from the 15% to the 25%. Also the primary residence restriction, so now at 60%, and then 100% on the 6-month term, so meaning no one can rent for less than a 6-month term. I think you'll also see quite a few subtle changes, really, but in the circulation, we'll go through those. So both vehicular circulation, service and delivery, the pedestrian circulation, the islands, the gathering spaces, they've all had some subtle changes. Again, the major vision hasn't changed. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about this vision. 2020, we created this master plan. Not my vision, not any one of your visions individually. This was thousands and thousands of data points that went into this master plan. There were 3 ideas for the redevelopment for Clark's Market, right? And they went from high aspirational, kind of implode most of this site, big hotel anchor, parking structure, et cetera. Second one, hotel anchor. Neither of those brought grocer to downtown Basalt. This option did, and so this was a redevelop within the canvas that exists of Clark's Market and decorative materials, essentially. Get that grocer back here, get residential, et cetera. Being a part of this, I have kind of this intimate understanding, right? So this option, as it flew at, call it 30,000 feet, really looked at probably how you would do that with going underground with parking. And you would get back this 25,000 square feet and, lots of residential on top, et cetera. Now, knowing that also, this was where the community identified, we want to make sure this is where we anchor density. We are steps from a raft to stop. We're surrounded by WeCycle. All of these things that can contribute to alternative transportation and getting people out of their cars. So you kind of fly a little bit lower and you start to study the site, and we can't go underneath. And so how do we balance still bringing that grocer back that can be very successful in a smaller footprint, and even increase from this particular that had density at 32 units. We can bump that back up, get more affordable housing, all of those things that in the bottom right-hand side, redeveloped Clark's Market was 4th in terms of, how many times it was mentioned of this is what we need to do in the community. First was government issues, so kudos to you guys, because I think if you surveyed the public right now, they would say you guys have really tackled that. And also you've brought a circulator. Well, this project does 2, 3, 4, and 5. Density over sprawl, increase affordable housing, redevelop Clark Market, bring vitality to downtown. Okay, so gathering up into this project, all these other things that the community said they wanted to do. All right, next slide. So let's talk about the other criteria of of why that first option, 31% of the community voted for bringing that grocer back, and a housing component that went along with that. Why is this diagram important to that? So I think that we really need to make sure that everyone understands the BCC site very, very clearly. I think there's a lot of misconceptions around the parking. It's public parking, and we might be taking some away or not, or it's essentially private. So the right-of-way for Basalt, for those watching online that can't see the pointer, this sort of left-hand side where it says Two Rivers Road Green, so that swoop is the right-of-way. So that is the leftover Y from the train that went up the frying pan. And then essentially BCC, you can kind of outline and these outer edges of the property line. And then A through N are individual property owners, each with multiple tenants in their buildings. And then everything that you see between, basically our parking lot, is all privately owned and commonly owned by the HOA. So to think about projects that would engage common area, always becomes a nest, sometimes a hornet's nest, sometimes a rat's nest, but meaning you would have to have HOA approval, unanimous HOA approval of all of our owners, including their lenders, all the other complexity. So when the community said, we really want to get this done, we want to bring a grocer, we want to redevelop Clark's Market, was it going to be, 30 years? Because you wait for all of that to somehow magically get together with the HOA. Really, the options were being able to redevelop A and E, or repurpose that existing building and try to release it. And that's been maybe trying to happen for a few years and really quite unsuccessfully. So from our perspective, kind of those were the two options, and we said, this is a great canvas. Let's do this great project within, one, what met with the master plan, two, with the CSC zone district, and three, within this property that doesn't mean we kind of implode all these other businesses in the BCC. And the HOA has been excited and fully in support of that. So that's our canvas. So next slide. So now I'll kind of get into our issues. So we talked about traffic, we talked about parking, we talked about kind of the building and the fit, right? So let's tackle parking first. So basically, we are adding parking, and we're doing this in two ways. We have a commercial demand that required 70 parking spaces. They were allocated there, not signed, but allocated through the HOA in that surface parking lot. We are doing 9,000 square feet of commercial, reducing the demand for parking, okay? Our residential basically is adding 58. So you can think of the total of BCC, we are adding 58 units, 58 parking spaces, and reducing the necessary demand because we're reducing the commercial. So kind of thinking about it that way, if you go to the next slide, we are basically adding to our private, HOA parking, this excess 31 spaces, okay? Now, all of those calculations, as James mentioned, are based on the existing code. So they are based on the CSC zone district. And that is one parking space per bedroom. So a studio requires one parking space, as does a one bedroom and a two bedroom, 2 parking spaces. So kind of that comment around also, how do you control that? How do you, more so, frankly, than what's there now? So you have an on-site property management that now manages that, and they manage both number of people in a unit as well as how many cars those people can have. So this is not a made-up number. This is real. This is basically saying if you had a grocer, here's how much parking it would require, and it was filling BCC. We now have added parking. We have put the residential into those parking spaces and remove this commercial demand from the additional spaces, okay? So the other comment about traffic, James mentioned it, January of 2022, Felsberg, Holt, and Olvig Did I get that right? FHU. So they did our traffic demand study. And boil it down, again, when we talk about existing commercial, sometimes you'll hear us reference either 21,500 square feet was the existing Clark's, and 2,500, 4,500 in 3,500 in decorative materials, so a total of 25,000. The parking study did the grocer only, and basically existing condition is 3,875 trips per day. This project, bring it back in, has residential now, 9,000 square feet of commercial. The reduction is 2,080 trips per day. So a 54% reduction in trip generation. Much of that occurring at the peak hours. So when you think about grocer, that PM peak hour, really significant reductions. Okay? We don't have a traffic plan? Yes, we do. 54% reduction in trip generation, okay, to change these land uses. So CDOT reviewed that, and their trigger is, this 20% increase. So they reviewed that and said, you're good, no more geometry necessary at the intersections, et cetera. So in addition, some comments around kind of our intersection. So while CDOT did not require a review, our civil engineer did full turning radius review, et cetera. And so the final recommendations, and we'll go into this on the site plan versus this diagram, remain a wide intersection so that your service vehicles, et cetera, for the gas station, the tankers, kind of everything that's happening on this site can still make their turning movements. But what we have done is we pulled the pedestrian crosswalk actually out so that it's visibility as you're making a turn. If you see right now, it's really kind of into the site. You can get part of the way into your turn and realize there's a pedestrian. So pulling this out so you have visibility before you're starting a turning movement, you can wait for a pedestrian and then make your turning movement. So those have kind of been some of those recommendations as well. Okay, so very quickly, the next slide. Just for some of you that hadn't seen this in the past, et cetera, this site is a confluence, right? It's the confluence of some of the more kind of newer Mountain West architecture of two rivers, our contemporary and beautiful gems of RMI and the River Conservancy, and then kind of right at this knuckle between that and the historic downtown. So like this as a confluence, the architecture is similarly to do so. It was to bring in and be the confluence of the historic downtown, the rail, and newer mountain architecture. And newer mountain architecture also brings in, right, fire resistance and energy conservation and, things that our buildings on Midland can't quite do right now. Next slide. Again, images evocative of the outdoor spaces we're trying to create. Better connections, gathering spaces, take what is a sea of asphalt and a quite aged building and bring in these spaces that balance and attract you and the twinkle lighting and places to gather, et cetera. Next slide, please. Again, James mentioned a whole lot of discussion around the grocery. We have gotten very comfortable with the definition now of grocery, what it brings to the table in a very unique way for a space that Tim and Andrew have been very confident they can fill, but again, in a creative way. So thinking about this from the perspective of a market component, a little bit of that food hall and some of the indoor gathering as well that can spill to the outdoor gathering spaces. Next slide. So thinking about the housing and the affordability, so our average unit size now is 509 square feet, so that's average. Obviously, our 2 bedrooms are larger, studios are slightly smaller. Very, very small, but extremely efficient and livable units. What's fascinating is what we've seen, all of us, some of us living in smaller spaces, designing smaller spaces. The technology around this efficient living has gone through the roof. People are living in tiny homes, they are loving them, and the market is responding. Whether it's with appliances, whether it's with furniture, your bedding, et cetera. So this represents both how to do that, but also the quality of that with some of these images. In addition to that, our building has brought in all of the storage, tons of bike storage, locker storage, et cetera. Next slide. All right, so site plan, we'll just go through a few of the things. I mean, James covered a lot of these. So again, you saw the diagram with tons of connectivity now through this site, both coming off of 2 rivers now in 3 different places. This one is existing and kind of cascades into the site. Here at the corner of Midland and 2 Rivers, same connection. And now you can continue up the new streetscape or into this site. And then a new connection, so halfway through the site, connecting down off of 2 Rivers. This is brand new, both through the little green space and then the connection here to the plaza. You know, when we kind of went back and just got a lot of the feedback from fire, and we just got to the point where they were not comfortable with the one-way up against the front of the building. So we said to Tim, I want to just kind of blow up trying to save most of this parking lot and just rethink the entire thing. And it turns out, you know, now we can do a 2-way, so it's a very straightforward fire access. They can, you know, stop and anchor at any point. It's very straightforward parking, you know, head in. We still have pass-through spaces, so for some of our tenants that may want to, or visitors, right, want to pull in a boat, we won't do wheel stops. We've got a lot of pull-through spaces that are great. Just kind of rethought outside of the hotel. And so they have this little space, might be able to do a little bit of green space or a plaza, et cetera, park up against that. So that's kind of, you know, most of these spaces, we actually gained a couple of parking spaces back that, you know, we had lost in a few other spots. So it actually ended up working out really well. We have a great island here. We can do, you know, just standard bike parking with the repair station or WeCycle, et cetera. We've got our little kind of amenity space for the public and our tenants. We have our own private tenant amenity space. One access in and out now of the garage, which really provides a lot safer pedestrian kind of crossing here, very obvious, only that one crossing, et cetera. So the changes to the plaza, so James mentioned this, so we really went through, I mean, I forced Sopers to do about every turning movement you could possibly imagine for a semi, just to see, you know, how we could make this as efficient as possible, et cetera. There is really one turning movement. So our, you know, service, both trash, drop off for the liquor, for the grocery, et cetera, is really where it's been in the existing condition of Clark's. And the turning movement is to come in here and back that semi around and into that spot. And that is really the only version that works. So we went ahead and we kind of had to kind of rethink, you know, this was out a little further. We could get rid of some more of this paving previously. Turns out we can't. But we still get this really great plaza, and I think we pulled it in about, you know, 12 feet or so. We lost one space that then when we redid this, we gained back. So that's kind of a bit of a change. Again, they were subtle changes from the first sketch plan. All right, next slide. So that's it for us. I'd imagine you guys have some questions, but in terms of just trying to, you know, get through most of our presentation and set the stage for any of those questions and public comment, we just really wanted to make sure we got the data out there for our parking, our traffic, our affordability, you know, height and massing, that image that you saw up there, and how this contextually fits and is a beautiful painting on the canvas we were given. Thanks.
Great, well, thank you, applicant. At this point, I think with council's consent, we'll take public comment. So this is a time for anybody that would like to address council and.
Questions before public comment?
Sure.
Clarification of anything they've covered? I'm really curious what their traffic study actually encompassed. It sounds like a parking lot study, but not a traffic in any of the surrounding area.
That'll be part of your public comment. And
Yeah, you can ask that question when you come up.
I would actually second this just in the fact of, do you have your traffic study to share?
It's been in our application.
It's in the application.
It is in this, but it's not in this packet. It's in,
Because this project was contingent on them doing a whole traffic study that didn't just include the parking lot.
But not this packet, right, James?
It's in your packet.
Okay, let me, we've got to get through this in a,
Yeah.
No,
we
there's
got
a
to get,
comment on the there's one line that says, I was just highlighting it for the mayor, that says your traffic study says that it will reduce traffic by, your comment 50%, but I didn't see the actual, like,
I'll
Tabulation.
I'll find the page number and be able to give it to you. Just let me work on that while public comment.
okay. So let me go back and explain public comment and the ground rules here. So we look forward to hearing everyone's comment. We value public participation, but it's got to be done in an orderly way. So the ground rules are these. One is limit your comments to 3 minutes. Make your statement. This is not an opportunity for individuals to cross-examine the applicant, to try to engage in dialogue with the elected officials up here. This is an opportunity for you to state your views and your recommendations and thoughts, whatever they may be, for council. Councilor Slack is going to keep track of time, so when he raises his arm, your 3 minutes are up, and that will be the conclusion of your remarks. So this is out of respect. A lot of people want to talk, and we have lots of business on a long night up here. So we again appreciate your participation, and so we will open this for public comment. And so whoever would like to go first, please signify. Just raise your hand, and I'll identify you. Larry, you want to go?
name and where you're from. Bill?
Yeah, and please state your name.
I'm going to stand. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, please state your name and
My name
address.
is Larry Yaw. I'm a basalt architect who over 20 years ago moved both family and our architectural firm to Basalt, where civic-minded professionals we were privileged to participate in many of the boards and the commissions in town. Also, as a whiff of credence, I have in my back pocket master's degrees from Columbia University in urban design, so I get the lingo. Firstly, I'd like to thank council and staff for a very innovative shepherding the work it took to define the form and substance of this vital product, and probably I should say kudos to the design team that recognized that. For too long, as we all know, Clark's Market site remained a fallow opportunity, in fact an impediment to now what is a developed assemblage of very needed civic occupancies. Those occupancies, including a variety of residential housing units, as you know, a grocery store with attendant services, landscape, pedestrian amenities, and covered parking is what I read. The presentation was over in excess of 70 covered parking spaces. So to end this and to get a little higher minded about this, for me, this project represents nothing less than a renaissance. A renaissance for Basalt's identity, a renaissance for its civic vitality. And I urge you without reservation, if that's possible, to carry this through to your first hearing. And thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Larry. Anyone else like to address council? Public comment? Please raise your hand. Come on up, please.
Hi there. My name's Alex.
Okay, would you state your name and address, please, for the record?
Alex Rager, and I live at 493 Holland Hills Road.
Great, thank you.
So I've been living here for about a year, and I feel nothing but an overwhelming sense of welcome by the community here, and that's been incredible. It's something that I'm privileged to see working here in downtown every day. This development, built by an outside private entity, may provide a market and housing, but at what cost? The cost, from what I can see, will be the displacement of small businesses and their employees during construction. The cost will be, it's almost emotional.
That's okay. Take your time, don't worry.
The cost will be a daily influx of traffic into a town already grappling with a lack of infrastructure. The cost is to those who already find it difficult to find housing here, just to be pushed farther aside for ski coast seasonal workers. The cost is our peace while the project is developed, and the agony we will feel should it coincide with the city's plan to replace our deteriorating water pipes. The cost will be the slow shift of the Basalt we love into something it is not, and we are sure to drive out small businesses and the people they employ along the way. Are the owners and workers of displaced businesses being compensated for their generosity in allowing you to uproot their lives? How does that compare to the projected profit margin of the incumbent enterprise? Is the proposed market going to support local farmers and culinary artisans, or sell what we can already purchase down the road? Will it invest and participate in our community and pay a living wage to workers, or will it make decisions in its own best interest? I understand bringing new businesses in and calling it growth, but I believe true growth is when the people here can enjoy a higher quality of life and standard of living. That true growth is actually knowing your neighbors and developing a rapport. That true growth happens when decisions are made to bolster existing small businesses over the interests of corporate empires. That true growth cannot be counted at the end of the day from a cash drawer. We must consider that the costs of this development are more than monetary, that not everyone will be touched by proposed benefits, and that in the end, the trappings will be left for us to bear. I'm here today because this community is full of people whose small businesses provide more than enough revenue to the city to deserve a fair shot. I'm here because I believe people who make Basalt what it is should have a real say in how their community decides to grow. Today, this committee has a decision to make. We can continue the sad story told around the valley of private interests thwarting locals' ability to thrive in a place they love, or we can be an example of how to progress the livelihoods of the hardworking people who make this town so great. I would like to see my elected officials vote for the local owners and workers rather than expand corporate interests. I would like to see this committee remember that if you push us out, you lose the Basalt you love, the one that compels you to join this committee in the first place. If this project is allowed to pass, that will be the resounding message, that the city is more willing to invest in corporate interests than the progress of those already here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, anyone else like to address council? Ted?
My name is Ted Guy. I live over on Swinging Bridge Lane in Basalt. In fact, after 5 years, I now own where I've rented for 7 years. I'm concerned, the master plan presentation had 25,000 square feet of retail or grocery, plus another 4,500 square feet, plus another 5,500 square feet. So under the master plan, that was a retail magnet. This project has 9,000 square feet. We're losing retail. Under the master plan that they presented, it showed 40 units. We're now having 67 units. And I know that there's a certain age group, probably from 21 to about 22, that likes tiny homes, but they're not really long-term living. And these units are 4,400 square feet. The bathrooms look like they belong in a 737. They're tiny. And those pictures, your couch is your bed. So I think that we need larger units and fewer units if they're going to do that. The zoning, we've seen what happened with this zone applied over here by the park. We crammed 10 pounds of stuff into a 1 pound bag. That's horrible over there. It looks like an industrial park. That is not Old Town Basalt. And this shouldn't be allowed to look anywhere close to that in a historic district. This is contiguous to the historic district and should have better architecture than it does now. The underlying C2 zone only allows 3 stories, and I'm doing this from memory, if you have affordable housing or if you have a hotel. Everything else is capped at 2 stories. And by my calculation, that means half or one of that extra story should be affordable housing. And that's not what we're getting. We're getting a lot less than 30-some units. We're getting 25%, not 50%. Also, I wonder what happens to the 15% that was on the chart that's not primary, it's not rent capped, but it has a 6-month lease. Who's occupying that 15%? The other thing is parking. They're using a parking ratio of 1 per bedroom. A 1-bedroom in Aspen requires 1.75, or houses 1.75 people on average. So they're basically don't have enough parking. After our bike trip on Saturday, I came down to Tipsy Trout for lunch, and the parking lot was full. I have more, but thank you.
Next, anyone else want to address council? Come on up.
Just a quick question. Can I surrender my time? Is that possible to
No.
someone else?
No.
Nope.
No, it's,
Okay.
that's,
I've seen you do that before in the first
well,
town
I'm
council
sorry
meeting.
that I didn't, so.
Well, then someone else can go first, so we'll cut this back way.
Okay. Well, then I will speak.
Okay.
My name is Nick Holkamp. I live at 8207 Elk Lane. Just brief about this. The traffic study, if they did do one, it would be nice to see where they did it, because I went to the last planning and zoning meeting and they said it was just conducted on Midland, not including Two Rivers. Well, that's a confluence, as you said, so if it doesn't include all 4 rows coming into that intersection, the traffic study is short. The housing, if we're doing 500 average square foot housing, calling it long-term rental, look at that parking lot now with boats, campers, RVs, bikes, all the other toys that we love to enjoy. Where are those going to go? People, there's not storage units in the valley to even acquire to hold your stuff, so it's just like you're shoving everybody into a shoebox, 6-month rental. Looks like they're kind of directing it to Skiko. Anything longer than that is, I would consider a long-term rental, a year. Anything less than that, Skiko can grab up, and we have no control over that. The 15%, where is that going to? Because that wasn't allocated into anything. It's just free market, I'm assuming, so that they can make more money off of that, and then it shorts the town of Basalt more units that are available, and we're just giving them away. So that's my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Andrea Morales. I live at 8207 Elk Lane. Town Council, you were appointed to be stewards of the town. I was very dismayed to hear folks telling me when talking about this project that our town mayor, who I voted for, was already saying that this project is a done deal. This letter has been very difficult to write because in hearing this is a done deal and with so little town turnout from the public, I wonder if I'm being heard anyways. I work with many people in our community from all different walks of life. So many people haven't heard a peep about what's going on, but that's how these developments happen, ones that forever change the face of small communities. I have read the master plan. It contradicts itself in many ways. The newest version had very little voter turnout on the issues that mattered most to the community. We keep pushing this grocery store, yet only 24% of the voters wanted one. I will say this again and again. We have a market. It's called Skips. I can get everything I need to make a meal. They are also in the process of expansion. Who are we as a community if we're not supporting our small local businesses? From the last planning and zoning meeting I attended last month on this matter, it did not sound as if the group had any direction to go and when it came to a market. So in essence, we could end up with another black hole in downtown Basalt that's now 3, almost 4 stories tall, blocking all the views of the gorgeous surrounding mountains, full of part-time residences that are not part of the laboring workforce we need. How is this adding to the vitality of Old Town and not just mucking up the landscape and traffic? Tim Belinsky said in the Aspen Times, May 13th of 2021, with regards to this project, and I quote, "It would increase the vitality of downtown Basalt by providing housing for year-round residents." I implore the town council, if we must move forward with this project, to hold him to his word and drop the nonsense that a 6-month lease is anything long-term. It sets up any housing being built capable of becoming seasonal employee housing or housing for part-time residents, which is a far cry from what this community needs. I am begging you to hold any housing built in this project to nothing less than a start with a 1-year lease. I am also asking the city council to insist that every unit built have no less than 1 designated parking spot available to its tenant. This should be a must, even if the Belinsky Light developers have to make their units larger, which quite honestly, their units under 500 square feet are very small for long-term living. Most people who sit on the council and zoning committee own homes, very nice homes for what I gather, yet there seems to be the acceptance that our working class folks shouldn't have a need for a decent living space. Definitely no extra space for a bike, skis, snowboard. They might not even be able to have a designated parking space by the trajectory that this project is going. My next giant concern, as should be all of ours, is the huge influx of traffic this is going to create. I feel confused why it seems like town council has turned a blind eye to the seriousness of this issue. Belinsky and Light agreed to do a traffic study, and during the planning and zoning meeting, I heard it said that it couldn't effectively be done. This was part of their due diligence and has to be one of the main concerns of the council for our town. I see us as bending over backwards to get a build done, while the Belinsky and Light team are bending over the town to get their project done. Please give me 1 more minute.
Not one more minute.
we'll just
Your
wrap
time
it
is,
up.
I'm sorry.
I've
time's
racked
up.
my brain about what could be a great addition to Basalt, what to do. I don't think we have to look far to reinvent the wheel. What if instead of a grocery store, we recreate
I'm sorry, this is
pizza?
not fair to everybody else. Everybody else being limited to 3 minutes, so we appreciate your comments. We know the drift. Thank you.
It's not fair to the community that we get 3 minutes and we have 2 more meetings, and we need to be heard. You guys are our voice as a community.
It's 1 minute. I'll give you a minute.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to address council? I'm sorry, you've had your time, and there is no provision for yielding time. We're going by the rules of the town. Sorry, it's in the town charter. It's basically the town rule of the road.
Gonzo finish reading it for, I mean, Gonzo, do you want to finish reading her letter?
Well, no, I have
Okay. All right, just-
Come on up. Who?
You don't want me reading it.
Okay, please come on up.
Deirdre Venables, 104 Evans Road. I live in Willits, and Willits is wonderful, but it's brand new. And that's the charm of Willits. The charm of Basalt is that it's old. And looking at these photos, and to me, it looks like Willits. And that's not what you want. You want to maintain the charm. And the gentleman over here had mentioned about rethinking the architecture. I think that's really important because the architecture will be there, as was said earlier, 50 years or longer. It should maintain the charm of old Basalt.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address council? Come on up.
Hi, my name is Don Samirich, 24 Pine Ridge in Basalt, and I own Jimbo's Liquors across the street.
Thank you.
When it comes to parking, you know, we have parking problems. It's in Midland. People want to park right in front of Heather's. I park my RV there. The fishermen park their boats year-long there. So that's not a parking problem. I mean, I shouldn't be parking my camper there, you know. I park this, and it's my problem. It's not the town's problem. So the parking problem, I think we're kind of like projecting our Midland parking problems into that. Is non-related, guys. There's plenty of spaces. All summer long with all the boats, all the campers, all the people, plenty of spaces. You can check that every day. Access, you know, we get some, you know, little traffic. It's still a beautiful town of beautiful people. I try to get out of there, even if there's like 10 cars there, the 4th car will let me go, you know? And I know that might change when we change a little bit and get more out-of-towners, but I wouldn't say that's a Basalt problem. I mean, we are all beautiful people that all, wanna, and it's natural. Someone's gonna change in your life, your first reaction, you wanna, protect it. I don't want any change, but then, you listen to guys that have been working year in, year out to make it happen. I think these guys do, deserve some credit. I couldn't believe it's your coworker, but in the last PNC meeting, they said, I feel you guys have been checking boxes on everything we asked you did, but you haven't surprised me. I'm like, do you think these guys could come and build Magic Kingdom there and it's been approved? No, they are doing it step by step to get it approved, and I just think, in my case, it's not gonna be beautiful to be out of there for 2 years, but I see of the greater good of our community. I mean, look at that. We have BLT, awesome food, completely underserved space. Jimbo's, we are the anchor that people talk about. It's been there 50 years. Roxy's came through, Clark's or whatever, City Market went by. We've been there, we've been watching it all, and we need, it's a hole. Are you kidding me? Behind there, 20,000 square feet empty. And that was their supermarket. Was there chaos when that was there? No. It was a supermarket with people parking there, driving in and out, and it just worked. It didn't work because they couldn't keep up with the demands of the town, but I don't think that was, a parking or a traffic problem. I love these people. I wish you give her a minute. I'm gonna step out. If I have 30 seconds, she can have.
Yeah, not doing that. Okay, next. Kathleen?
Howdy. My name's Kathleen Cole. I live at 589 East Cypress Drive. I've been a Basalt resident for 24 years. I was a business owner for 13. And I've been to a lot of meetings, planning and zoning, the meetings here. I agree that the traffic issue is paramount. There's been no traffic studies as far as traffic counts at that intersection, I don't believe. There's more traffic now than we've ever had. A lot of what we are hearing from our town meetings, that was 5 years ago, our town is a totally different place. It's a totally different place from the 2020 amendment to the master plan. So traffic is still a huge concern for me, and I believe it's what people, when we're talking about the first impressions of Basalt, if people can't get into this town to go to the restaurants and the retail, that part of our town is going to go away. And that is the charm, the history, and this is the Basalt that we love. I'm still unclear on the 40%, 60% is supposed to be for long-term primary residents. That still leaves 40% for second homeowners. I'm adamant that it should be 100% project for primary residences. No ifs, ands, or buts. And I don't think that's been settled. It hasn't been mentioned tonight, and it's one of the things that I feel very strongly about. One of the other discussion items that we've heard about is that it's consistent with the master plan, I believe it's inconsistent with the master plan. Quote, and this is a quote, people and community character. This property, what they're talking about in the plaza, does not incorporate a substantial community or public space component, which is required in all new developments. From what I can gather, we're looking at about maybe 12 feet of plaza space. Could be the whole width of the building, but it is not a gathering place. It is not a gracious component that we should be looking for this town. I think, I actually feel very strongly, I agree with what Andre was saying. A lot of people have heard that it's a done deal. Let's take it to the people in a vote.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think you had your time, but if it's a quick question.
Like a minute and a half?
No, I think you've,
She didn't use all her time. Yeah, I didn't think I was. This is the future of the salt.
Can we,
Yeah, seriously.
is it possible to enter that into the minutes? Can you send us that?
It's one paragraph, and Mr. Belinsky reached out to try to talk to me about ideas, and it is an ideas paragraph. They would be interested in
you can
hearing
submit,
it.
if you have something written there, you can submit it for the record. We'll accept that.
I will read it for you. I'm happy to.
Thank you.
I will read it in my time. I'm happy to read it.
I think we need to hear what people have to say.
Well then, sir, do you want to read it? I mean,
Is there somebody else who'd like to do this? It's one paragraph.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, this paragraph. Thank
My name is
you.
David Strickland. I've lived in the salt here my whole life. I've seen several different levels of changes come through. You know, this last couple of years has been a little bit different, and we've seen this Clark's Market building, discount grocery. We've seen it in multiple stages of decline, and it's been completely unusable almost for the last 5-10 years. It's been an empty space. We could have done something with it. We could have been talking about this for the last 5 to 10 years, and we haven't. And it's interesting that everything's being pushed through, kind of. All these housing developments are coming up on the same days. So here I am reading this paragraph on behalf. I've racked my brain about what could be a great addition to Basalt. What do we need? I don't think we have to look far to reinvent the model. What if instead of a grocery store, we created Peaches? It has to exist on Galena Street in Aspen. They have a nice outdoor dining space and a little indoor, and a line out the door, as the space was pretty small. They served a healthy breakfast and lunches, coffees, tea, pastries, and had healthy grab-and-go meals. People loved it, and let's face it, there's nowhere to go to get a gourmet salad in the Mid-Valley. People have been craving this kind of business for years. My next idea is to put a pair with a diversified market very akin to Val's or Epicurious. They had a delicious upscale grab-and-go meals and think it would pair nicely with Peaches, yet not to be in direct competition with Skips. And lastly, how about we make this build as energy efficient as possible, since we are right down the way from what used to be the biggest renewable energy think tank in the world. Yes, I realize the build will cost our country, and our world is trying to significantly more, but if we want something special to add to our community, and this is the direction our country and world is trying to go and needs to go, but how about Basalt be a leader in showing how it can be done? It will put us on the map. An even more significant way could see us be a model for how to build sustainably. And I don't think that this much parking lot space is gonna be good for Basalt. I think it's gonna turn everything into a parking lot. You know, we paved over Paradise and we put up a parking lot, and we just have so many opportunities to do so many different things. And this seems really big, really tall, really boxy. Seems like the whole reason that they annexed Willits was so they could build those types of gigantic, enormous structures. And, you know, please listen and please realize that we can literally build anything. Nuremberg, Germany built the Nuremberg Ring to promote business, and look at how well that's done. And we live in a place where we have all the opportunities absolutely to do anything beautiful, sustainable, gorgeous. And I'm not sure if a big square building that's parking lots is really what we're looking for here in Basalt, just to accommodate people. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Going once. Come on up, please.
Hi, my name is Neil Glazer. I live at 550 East Sopers Drive. A couple concerns I have are, one, the footprint of the space, how many apartments are going to be there, the size of those apartments. I can't imagine that, I come from New York City, I can't imagine that people long-term want to live in a 480, 500 square foot residence here, having all the toys and having the things that they want to do and be a viable citizen of this community. So the size of the apartments is a big concern. That's the first thing you see when you're coming down Two Rivers Road before you enter the historic part of town. And I'm concerned about what it looks like. You know, as somebody else said, this isn't Willits, this is Basalt. Willits looks brand new, it's modern, and that's great, but this should have a character of its own for the old town of Basalt. And the number of units in that development seem to be enormous. I think the scale is really big for the amount of space that it is. It's very dense, and those are my concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else, additional comments? Going once, going twice, going three times, okay. So now it's an opportunity for council to address questions to the applicant, and I know there were several regarding the parking study and some discussion on arrangements for the grocery and what the nature of that grocery would be. So we've got some things to talk about here, so who wants to go?
Did you find the traffic study in it? Am I
So
crazy?
I looked, there's excerpts from the application. The traffic study is not in the packet materials. There is comments that provide a summary of those on page 192 of the packet. I do have the traffic study right here from Felsberg, Holt, and Ullvig that we can provide to council in the packet for the next meeting.
Yeah, I'd love it.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Can I
Yeah,
start?
go ahead.
I understand someone professional is hired to do that traffic study. And I understand that this is a transit-oriented development. I've been around here long enough to see all these comments thrown around. There's no way you can add 58 more parking spots in that area and not create more traffic. I understand it's based on a 25,000 square foot Clark's Market. I don't know what numbers they're running on there. I've turned out of that lot twice in the last week, and it is atrocious. It's not your guys' fault. You didn't design it. You cannot add more cars into there and make less traffic. It's impossible. You can't add 67 units of people and say they're all gonna ride their bike, they're all gonna hop on a bus. That's just not America. That's not how we work. And I'm excited to view the details of this traffic study. I understand where their numbers come from. I've looked at them through the other developments, but it's just, it's mind-boggling to me that we can throw that out there, that it's gonna create less traffic with 58 more spots.
Heather, do you want to respond to it?
Yeah, so you guys haven't been able to see the whole thing. So this is more just probably for, the public, for you all, so sort of an intro to what you'll be able to review in that document. So parking and trip generation are two very different things, right? So yes, we hire a professional. The professional uses standard trip generation rates. Trip generation rates are significantly higher for commercial square footages than they are for residential. Their calculations don't actually account even for any reductions in the trip generation. They just used the standard trip generation counts for residential. So they didn't even do any discounts for TOD or anything else. So they are saying not parking spaces, your square footage use and how many trips does that square footage use generate. So normally, traffic study, you're doing all the background information, you're doing a trip generation for your project, and frankly, this is the first project I've ever been involved in that has basically taken a square footage and really looked at how that's reversed and, provided a reduction in trip generation, right? So you're taking an existing use, 25,000 square feet of commercial, this much trip generation, we're switching a significant amount of that square footage to residential, here's your trip generation, okay? So normally you would do the background data of an intersection, you would say, here's how much my project is now adding to this background, and here's what we should have to mitigate for this additional impact as a project. So you have a very basic traffic study because they're essentially saying we're reducing that traffic count. Now, do you have a background sort of traffic, thing happening in Basalt because you have a lot going on, and in the summertime there's people and cars, etc. So is that intersection busy? Absolutely. If you were to add the 25, like what you're looking at fully in the master plan, the 25,000 square feet and the residential, etc., you're now having a project that's bumping that issue even higher. So again, you just have to kind of balance, what are we really trying to say, and do you want, nothing to happen here because you have a background, every once in a while I have to wait for some cars to go by, or the fourth person in line. So all we can do is provide the data. That data is based on standards. Frankly, those standards are even higher because they're a sort of a suburban standard, so they're not even a walkable community like this. But that said, there were no discounts taken in the traffic study that you see.
And I wasn't saying you guys padded it, and I think we can go through a lot of studies, and there's a lot of studies that you compare to real world situations.
And all we can do is provide that data. Understood.
I'm allowed to make my comments.
And I think for the perception, there's almost 30,000 square feet of commercial space there now, and we're reducing that to 9,000. So that's where the trade-off comes.
But I think the biggest thing that's not being taken into account is, there's 25,000 square feet of commercial space, but it's not used. Right. And traffic's still a problem. So, I mean.
So you're saying existing condition of an empty vacant lot. We did not do that traffic study. We did not do a traffic study that says you have a vacant, effectively blighted property.
But what you can't discount is that there's 25,000 square foot empty building there that has a traffic problem at that intersection.
So clearly it has nothing to do with that building.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. It has zero to do with that building.
Right.
No, I mean, that's really it. I understand the other concerns. I mean, you guys have done a lot of work on this, and I really appreciate you always listening, always coming back with new ideas, tailoring this project to what we've done in the master plan, and I just think it's hard. It's in Old Town. This is something that we will live with for the rest of our lives, and it's just a hard pill to swallow, and that's where I stand.
Do you guys have projected rental rates? I think I asked during the sketch plan.
Projected what?
Rental rates.
Well, we have proof of rental rates in terms of what we already offer in Willits.
And what you guys are gonna offer these at? I remember you guys.
We don't have studios out at Willits. That's new territory. But we were looking earlier today at AMI numbers, which I think we'd all recognize as kind of being objective, or as objective as we can get about things. And our underwritten rental rates on what's left of free market in this property, and what is analogous to the one bedrooms that we have at Willits and properties that we own. And that's not just one property out there at Willits setting that mark. There's two official apartment buildings that are publicly disclosing, I guess, or showing their rental rates, and we're one of them. And then you also have all the little condos that rent over time. But we're in that range of 120% of AMI, 140% of AMI, those kind of numbers. So and as it relates to our history at Lumen, it's about a year and 4 months old right now. And we had nobody leave due to rental rates. I think we had 2 people in 32 units that termed out for other reasons. They left the valley. So I think you're got a group here that tries to, kind of hold the line. And
so it's in that 120 to 140.
Yeah, that's what we were saying. We looked at it just to make sure that for this kind of question, Glenn. And we're pretty proud of that.
Other comments, questions from council? So before we close out on.
Hold on, she's got.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask, is it still of interest to the developer to build something with larger and fewer units. I agree with the comments about it feeling like these tiny boxes and a lot of them, and it just makes me concerned for like the longevity of like how long people will want to stay there. And it feels kind of like we've got this big beautiful open space and we're just like cramming people in to these tiny apartments. And was there ever any thought about making larger units and fewer units so that we have, you know, less cars? And
The thought that, the answer is yes, and we have larger units at our property in Basalt, or in Willits. I'm listening to people that mine that run businesses that are begging me for a place for their people to live. And they're not saying, we really want 40 units and have them be bigger. They're saying, can you build 100? And those are the people, I mean, we're getting, it's hard to get people to come out and, you know, speak up and show up when they're supporting you, but there's a lot of people out there that are saying, please, please, please build a place for my people to work and live.
Then why not a longer lease term than 6 months?
Can we stay on that earlier one, the size? Because Bach also was supportive of trying some smaller units. We have experience with selling units that were in the range of these unit sizes, 425, 450,000. We had people stacked up waiting to buy those units. There's certainly a demand. And in terms of equating any apartment, frankly, any apartment program, regardless of size, to long-term forever living is not necessarily the goal for most people in the community. They use that as a transitionary step to find something to purchase, to be on their own and control their ownership. So this is, when we hear, you know, what about living there forever? I don't think it's the nature of apartments regardless. And as Andrew said, we have so many people waiting to get these units and to have a place for their employees. So anyway, then you asked about.
I'd also like to add that there's significant bike storage and storage units. So it's not like that's all you've got.
I understand that. I'm also asking about the 6 month lease. Why is that more attractive than like a year lease?
You know, our managers want the flexibility to keep the place full. Someone will come along for a year and, you know, have to leave early. And you'll want to someone will want, we think 6 months is a good number. That's not someone that's coming for just the winter or, you know, just the summer, or certainly not a second homeowner coming up and, you know, Airbnb it with their buddies. We feel like that's a pretty long-term lease.
Can I address that too? We're doing a good job here. There's something about short-terming units that is way different than how the apartment that we're building and we've got experience with, and that's furniture. If you have short-term Airbnb or whatever, those seasonal workers don't show up with a U-Haul and all their stuff. They show up with a piece of luggage and they expect it all to be provided. They need it to all be provided for them. If there was something that was kind of creatively thinking here, just thou shalt not put furniture in these units, that's okay with us. We're not going to furnish these units. It also implies you know, a different kind of management routine than a standard lease, because the in and the out, the intensity on the building. The 6 month lease is not, I don't know that we even have a 6 month lease out at Lumen. I mean, this is a lot of talk about that little thing that was just kind of left to be, you know, allowing us some flexibility. So it's not a business strategy to use 6 month leases, and it wouldn't equate to that kind of a renter or kind of a tenant that wants to have furniture, expects it, needs it. A seasonal employee, in the discussion about SKICO, we haven't had a conversation with SKICO, just so you all know. So there's a lot of kind of phantoms that we're hearing about.
So would we be open to a year lease then? Like everything's a year lease?
What we'd like to keep, Dieter, is the flexibility in case we need to have something less than a full year. But right now, is it 40% or how much?
60%.
60% is a 1 year?
Oh, no, sorry, that's our,
Yeah,
100%
60%
is
is
half
our,
of
all of
it.
it's.
They're all at least
6
6
months.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump into, and I yell at these guys for using anecdotes, but I'm gonna use an anecdote because Scott and I are the perfect case study. So we are trying to hire people. And one, we all know there's like a lack of places, but the 6-month lease is really critical. And I'm talking even mid to higher level architects and landscape architects. They came as a couple, they need some time. And if you don't hit this perfect window of May, when maybe some people leave and you can quick get into a place for 6 months or whatever, till you get your feet, till you figure out where you can be, till you find a little bit longer rental, till you get to know the valley and you know where you want to stay, right? Like just all of those things. We've had some people come and it didn't work out, and suddenly they're trying to get out of a year lease. And it's just some of that flexibility to not be tied in, whether it's because it is a little bit of, I need to get my feet here and it turns out I want to stay there, or I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to go next, that kind of thing. So I just think that, 6 months provides a lot of that flexibility for the workforce that you're trying to put in a project like this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. My last comment is, I do agree with the community members that commented that this building very much looks like it belongs in Willits. I live in Willits. I think it's a great spot. I don't see that this is contiguous at all with the charm of Old Town. In fact, to me, when the photos that you were showing, the representations of this building kind of juxtaposed with the downtown, I don't think that it looks very nice, and I don't think that it has the charm and the character that people love about Old Town. It looks like Willits. And from going through, a few meetings ago about people's comments about the Midland renovation and streetscape project, people are saying we don't want it to look like Willits.
Sure.
Old Town is Old Town,
Sure.
and Willits is Willits. And yeah, they've got different vibes, and I think that this building looks like every other kind of modern box that has been put up in Willits.
Glenn, and then David's got some
Do you want
questions.
to go first? I have
You go ahead.
This is probably for staff and you guys. Speaking of Midland, I know that in this proposal, it has a parking agreement for the parking spaces that are within the town right of way. Now, because you're on the people that are designing it. If a roundabout is gonna go in here, which would help traffic for Midland, there's probably not enough room there, and that's the spot that room would come from. So have you guys considered that with your ingress, egress, how everything works? Just because we don't want to shoehorn not being able to do all that in one time. Just a concern I have.
David?
So, you guys, those who know me know I process a lot. And this, I want to say first off to everybody listening, this is not a done deal. And I'll make sure I get like, this is not a done deal. I think there's a lot of trepidation up here about what is the impact of this and what does it mean? It's a challenging decision. And it's one of those decisions, if we do nothing, we're left with a blighted property, right? So you can't just let it ride and say, no, this is, but you also, if you do pick the wrong decision, you're gonna end up with what you don't want. So you have blighted property, what you don't, and we have to keep working through this together, and this dialogue's awesome. I would like to see more public comment. I appreciate the applicants, working with us and trying to figure out a way to get through this, because the current stage just doesn't work. It does not work having a blighted property in our town, but we have to get it right. So anyway, get off the soapbox about it. You got to get tactical. We do need that traffic study. I'm frankly a little disappointed we didn't see more of that data in there, because it seems like it came up in the discussions here, and it would have been nice to have been a little more prepared, but next time, right? It's cool. We'll get it next time. I guess going forward, how can we make this property and this project more aesthetically pleasing and livable as far as the space? Because I think that's kind of the common theme that I'm hearing, and I think that's probably one of the main reasons a lot of us have that trepidation, is because it's like, okay, we want to get rid of the empty building, but we want to make sure that what's sitting there looks great for decades, right? Decades. And you guys you've tweaked the height, we've tweaked this, and it's fitting a lot of the requirements, it's checking a lot of the boxes. But how can we kind of up-level this a little bit from an aesthetic standpoint, from a livability standpoint, just to get everybody feeling a little bit better? Because right now, what I feel like is that everybody's like, well, geez, we don't want the empty space, but not totally satisfied with what we're gonna get as it stands today. And I don't think that's how we want to end up going forward out of this. If this is what the project ultimately becomes, this thing we're like, well, we kind of settled on that, let's move on. I think people want to be a little more excited about it. And this is coming from something, I'm not a design person, so I am not the guy who's going to say, hey, you know what, do this over here, tweak it. That's not my thing. But I know when I look at something and I hear people say, I'm not excited about it. And I'm not super excited about the way it looks either. But what can we do? What can we do about it? Because we have an empty building. Like, we have to do something, right? If we can't all come together with this opportunity we have now, who knows how many years it's going to be until something else happens. And that kind of stinks. Like, if we have an empty building for another decade or two. So rather than kind of like, well, not meeting in the middle and figuring it out, let's figure it out. And I think a lot of it, let's hear from more people coming up and do it with public comment who have some thoughts and suggestions on how we can improve it. I think this was super informative tonight. A lot of what we've heard before, but we have heard some new stuff, and let's just keep it going. Let's try to figure this out together.
Thank you.
I have one other question. Do you guys have the proposed dimensions on that patio in front of the grocer?
28 feet wide,
20 across,
yes, and the full length of the building,
full length, okay.
so not whatever was referenced.
No, I know, I was just wondering, because
Thanks.
as going through, it's hard to see in some of these
Thanks.
pictures. And
Comparable, we had used Paradise Bakery, that kind of space. It's about that width, only longer.
Well, I'd be pleased to make a few remarks, and then I think where we're going to end up with this is maybe call it a night, and we're going to continue this, and maybe we reserve some time for a more in-depth look at the trip counts and traffic generation, and we have yet to get into the various kind of market concepts. But my kind of take on the site and the proposal and what's before us is really flows from the comprehensive plan and basically, the 1,000 people that participated in the open houses, in the public meetings, in the questionnaires, and the outreach. I ran for office, and I had a platform of 4 major points. Redevelopment of the grocery store. I probably talked to 2,000 people walking door to door, knocking on every door and talking to people. And I told them it was one of my top priorities was to get this property redeveloped. I thought it was shameful to have an empty space that is so pivotal and important to the imagery of the town. And so I still stand by that. Anybody that's studied urban design or planning will tell you, going back to Jane Jacobs and Death of the American City, that principle number 1 is that you place density where it belongs, which is in the urban core. So, we've done a great job developing an urban growth boundary. We've protected our boundaries. We are surrounded with deed-restricted open space, and our future will consist of making smart choices about infill parcels and being judicious about what we put on these lands to make sure the town evolves in a rational. This proposal has changed quite a bit. It was 4 stories when it first came in. We got it down to 3. There were no deed restrictions on it when it came in. We now have 6-month minimum leases. We now have 25% affordable housing and maybe more. We're going to discuss the possibility of buying deed restrictions to use our public funds to expand our inventory of housing. This is something we've talked about for 15 years in Basalt, never done anything about it. This is transit-oriented development. So this is 175 feet from a major raft to stop that can take you anywhere from Rifle to Aspen, 175 feet away from these units. We have, people worry about mass and scale, and this building's out of character. I point out to everybody, we have a 5-story, it used to be called the Elevator Building. It's the Two Rivers Apartments across the street. It's 5 stories. It's 55 feet high. I've been here for a long time. I've lived in the valley 50 years. I've never heard a complaint about that building. Maybe Kathleen, maybe Kath, what's that?
So it's also built into the hill. It's a little
This is
slightly
this is my
disingenuous.
time.
I
This is
know.
my time.
Listen,
So this is my view, okay?
No problem.
You're entitled to yours. You know, I think the new urbanist approach to the market concept is really a great idea. The concern I would have, just so you guys can be well sort of advised, is that this European stall concept sounds like it could result in the creation of a series of subdivided stalls that remain empty for the next 30 years. So the concept of a central grocer is going to be key, at least to secure my vote anyway. This has got to be a real, honest to God grocery store. And I love Skips. I shop there every day and support them. I think it's a wonderful business. It's a specialty produce shop. I mean, it's great. A grocery store has minimal first aid things. It's got a whole variety of products that Skip's not interested in getting into. And this is not going to put Skip under the bus. This is additive. I mean, there's a whole concept of marketing, the shopping center effect, where people come and, you know, when Whole Foods came in, the theory was that City Market was going to go under. Well, the gross sales of both of those stores have escalated rapidly, and they feed off of one another. It's a complementary shopping center effect. So I have no concern. I think Skip will actually benefit from this increased foot traffic in the town. So the site has been a blank spot for 12 years, and I worked on this hard back in 08 and 09, and so this is not something that we just cooked up here in the last couple of weeks. I've been personally working at this since 2008, and I've sat through probably 20 interviews with prospective developers, and one idea was worse than the other. I can assure you this by a wide margin is the best idea that we've seen, because there were some truly bad ones. So the Basalt that I miss, the one that I have nostalgia about, is the Basalt that had the Basalt Bike and Ski Shop, that had Bristlecone Sports, that had Midland Clothing Company, and that had a viable retail core. Now we've had to soften our code and allow offices to occupy ground floor space on our main street. Yeah, we have some, restaurants that seem to flourish at peak times during the summer and winter, but the rest of it's just not happening. And the only thing that will make it happen is foot traffic, body heat, and spending that goes with folks that live in the commercial core of the community. So I do honestly believe that this will reduce trip generation on 82 for renters. I think that I can see a plausible argument that, and of course we came to the valley, this was a going grocery store, and so it was open 10, 12 hours a day. So if you do a traffic study that says, let's look back 15 years when the store was open, and it was open 10 hours a day, and you had constant turnover and visitation and the in and out that associated with a grocery store, and you match that up against apartments where people make a movement once in the morning and once in the evening, there's no cause for them to be milling in and out all day long. They go to work and then they come back. So I don't find that so incredible that there could be a reduction in trip generation, but I would look forward to seeing the actual analysis to confirm that. I look at this differently. I campaigned hard on this on this topic. I think it's critical to the long-term success and vitality of our downtown. And what I talked to 2,000 people about was, you got to do 3 things. You got to finish the river park, you got to fix up downtown, and you got to redevelop the grocery store. In addition, a whole bunch of Willits-related stuff, but relative to Old Town Basalt, they were the priorities. So I'm with David. I really want to find a way forward, but I'm way more favorably disposed towards the proposal than some of the negative commentary we've had tonight. So just for what that's worth, that's where I'm at.
I want to see it move forward as well, and on that note, I'm going to say, Mayor, I move that the town council continue ordinance number 14, series of 2022 on first reading for the July 22nd, 2022 meeting.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Pam, please call the roll.
Okay, let's begin with David Knight,
Yes.
Angela Anderson,
Yes.
Glenn Drummond,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
Bill Kane,
Yes.
and Dieter Schindler.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Our next meeting is July 26th.
Sorry, point of order, do we need to do 6.2C? It's a separate,
Or can we just continue that?
Continue that.
what do we have to do with that
So
one?
is Jeff still there? Jeff, can we by reference, continue the public hearing?
continue
Do we
it.
need a separate motion to continue the public hearing?
we do.
You should have a second motion.
I think you know the answer to that.
Mayor, I move the town council continue ordinance number 15, series of 2022 on first reading, and continue and set the same public hearing for July 26th, 2022.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those, or Pam, please call the roll. Once again, sorry.
Sure, yes. Let's begin with Ryan Slack,
Yes.
Bill Kane,
Yes.
Dieter Schindler,
Yes.
David Knight,
Yes.
Angela Anderson,
Yes.
and Glenn Drummond.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for making
you,
that
guys.
second motion.
So,
I couldn't get to my mute button.
We have one more item
That's it.
here.
We're done.
No, we don't.
Bang the gavel.
No, I just invented another ordinance.
That's fine.
All right, guys, thanks.
So, Mayor, is